When Kane stepped into Queen's lab, the scientist had put on another pound or two. His cheeks were rounder, and he was furiously muttering at a petri dish. "What? You want me to research and modify Den Den Mushi?" Queen glared at Kane, who stood there with the impertinent cheek to nod like an obedient pupil. He was tempted to throw the viral stock he just cultured straight in Kane's face. "I'm the world-renowned Plague, the scientist who makes the new world tremble. I can design viruses that decide the fate of thousands. Now you want me to waste time on this childish nonsense? After the last fiasco with agricultural machines and the pollution cure, my reputation is already ruined. Damn you. Go pester that judge fellow then," Queen sneered. "He's the scientist you're so smitten with." "Mind your image, Queen." Kane almost laughed at the Lin Dayu-like drama Queen was putting on. The truth was Judge was simply swamped. Artificial devil fruits and suit improvements had eaten up his time. But he couldn't say that. Kane forced a conciliatory smile. "Judge handles bloodline factors. That's his specialty. But when it comes to biological modification, how can he compare to you?" Queen snorted, chin high. "Of course not. My biological modification tech is the best in the world." He really believed it. Kane let him have the illusion. After all, everyone in the field secretly lived and died by how close they were to being Vegapunk level. Vegapunk's work, especially the Seraphim, which fused bloodline factors with biological modification, or his experiments that made inanimate things eat devil fruits, had set the bar impossibly high. Kane chuckled. "So I need you to get involved." "I refuse." Queen's voice came out before he thought. "I'm busy with my next-generation plague bombs. When those results are ready, the whole sea will tremble for me." He honestly hoped those weapons would make his name feared and fetch him a bounty to overshadow Kane's. Kane rolled his eyes inwardly. "Sigh. I was thinking I'd let you make a big name for yourself, but if you won't, maybe I'll have Judge show his face to Kaido again." The idea of Judge stealing favor with Big Brother Kaido made Queen grit his teeth. He could not stand the thought. Kane watched his irritation and let a knowing smile fade. He turned back calmly. "I found a stable, huge new income stream for the Beast Pirates, selling Den Den Mushi." Queen relaxed, expecting some major engineering project. "Do you know how rare wild Den Den Mushi are, kid? Go on. If it's a small job, Judge can handle it." Everyone knew Den Den Mushi were prized, rare in the wild and virtually impossible to breed. Kane grinned. "They're artificially bred. This is the first batch." "Artificially bred? How many?" 500 of various types. Queen's derisive smile dropped. "Only 500. Wait, did you say 500? Did you raid merchant ships?" Even common Den Den Mushi could cost 500,000 berries. Special black and white models commanded millions or were priceless. It wasn't the money that shocked Queen so much as the sheer number. No one could assemble that many at once. Merchant houses might have dozens in stock, not hundreds. Kane wagged a finger and smiled confidently. "They're bred, and this is only the first batch." "Did Judge crack the tech?" Queen demanded. The idea that Judge would outshine him before Kaido made his jaw ache. "No, don't worry about the source. Tell me whether you can do it. If you can't, I'll bring Judge in. This kind of modification should be within his reach." Kane took a step toward the door. Queen immediately smoothed his expression and stopped him, sliding an arm around Kane's shoulder. "Kid, don't be in such a hurry. That Judge fellow isn't as accomplished as he looks. Leave it to me. I'll arrange everything perfectly for you." Queen's mind started racing. If Kane could reliably supply large numbers of artificially bred Den Den Mushi, this wasn't a small sideline. It was a massive recurring market worth hundreds of billions. Den Den Mushi are consumables with limited lifespans. Customers would have to keep buying. That whole stream of credit should belong to him, Queen. "Excellent," he said. Kane nodded, then shifted his tone, serious. "I have one condition." "Tell me," Queen said eagerly, chest puffed. "I want a special visual Den Den Mushi," Kane said, eyes bright. "It must not only broadcast images, but also be able to forcibly control other Den Den Mushi worldwide, to make them play its content." Queen's excitement flagged into a frown. He knew Vegapunk had once created a visual model and used it to unveil some of the Void Century truths. Signal transmission wasn't the main problem. The snails already had their own global communication method. The real challenge was the forced control mechanism. You know how difficult that would be? Queen asked. Kane shrugged. Is it that hard? Vegapunk did similar things. Leave it to me, Queen said, brimming with sudden certainty, already thinking of the fame and the possible backdoors to leave in Beast's Pirates units. Kane smiled, satisfied. If Queen could build a visual Den Den Mushi with a hidden override, that would be perfect. With the deal sealed, Kane left to head to Nine Snake Island to hunt beasts for breeding stock. But there was one more matter to settle first. He couldn't let that Birdman Morgans print whatever outrageous thing he fancied, not without a warning. The Queen of Information, Stussy, would know how to handle Morgans, and Kane still had leverage over her. She'd cooperate whether she wanted to or not. Set course for the Pleasure District, Kane ordered. The Raikugo turned toward the entertainment quarter, its sails catching wind as Kane prepared to rein in the only Birdman who loved headlines more than truth. Chapter 82, Arrival at the Pleasure District. Somewhere in the New World, the Raikugo cut through the sea toward a small island ahead. That island was the Pleasure District, a notorious pirate den, the largest red light district in the world, founded and run by the underworld empress Stussy. As they neared the pier, a fleet of brightly decorated boats came into view, the Pleasure District's flower boats. When business on the island slowed, they sailed out to other islands to ply their trade. The arrival of the Raikugo barely caused a ripple. The Pleasure District was used to great pirates dropping by. The girls on the flower boats waved enthusiastically at everyone aboard, and some of the bolder ones even offered a little extra attention. Oh, this is paradise! Sanji's eyes turned into hearts, his knees nearly buckled. He had never been happier to be with the Beast's pirates. In the East Blue, where would he have seen anything like this? Perverted cook, control yourself, Zoro said, stepping away as if proximity could spread shame. You stinking swordsman, what did you say? You Philistine who can't appreciate beauty. Sanji bristled and stuck his chin out. Violet watched with evident jealousy. Looks like somebody isn't satisfied, she said sourly. Kozuki Hiyori said nothing, but her large expressive eyes locked on Kane and communicated more than words. Reiju, leaning in, smoothed the slight wrinkle in Kane's collar and murmured with a smile, "Remember to come back tonight." Kane scowled. "I really have serious business this time. Do you all think so little of me?" He wasn't short of pretty women. Why care about girls who were obviously available to everyone? Violet's gaze flicked over Yamato, Hiyori, and Reiju, and then back to Kane, as if to say, "You know how it is." Kane admitted he had a weak spot for temptation, but indulging in pleasures felt too good to resist. Yamato, thick-skinned and oblivious to the jealous undercurrent, gaped at the flower boats with open curiosity. Kane moved on. "Cough, Kuma, you coming to relax? I'll cover everything." Kuma waved his hands, his honest face flushing red. No, I'll stay on the ship with Bonnie. Don't be shy." Kane ruffled Kuma's arm with a wicked grin. "You're not still a virgin, are you?" Those words overwhelmed pure-hearted Kuma. His face burned as if his brain had overheated. He clapped a hand over Bonnie's ears. "Mr. Kane, please, don't say that in front of a child." Sorry, Kane said, rein in his smile. "I was joking, but everyone needs some relaxation. Go enjoy the Pleasure District today. I'll reimburse you." "Thank you, Boss Kane." The pirates on the Raikugo cheered. Free entertainment didn't come around every day. "Attention," Kane added quickly. "Don't order anything too expensive." The Pleasure District's prices were high. If they all splurged, he wouldn't be the first to go bankrupt. "And one more thing," he said, looking at Ace, Sanji, and Zoro. "You three stick with Kuma. No drinking with the girls. That's adult business." Ace's face fell. "I was really looking forward to it." Sanji, however, was fine. He could be lustful, but he carried his own chivalric code. He appreciated beauty without being lecherous. Reiju tugged at his sleeve and whispered instructions into his ear as she shepherded him along. They headed into the Pleasure District's largest and most famous bar. As Kane stepped through the door, he was immediately surrounded by scantily clad, well-off girls. "Brother, you're so handsome," one cooed. "Daddy, want to dance?" another chimed. "Master, come play." Sweet, silky voices pressed in closer, warm bodies brushing his arms until he was half escorted, half led to a luxurious booth. "You know me?" Kane asked as he laughed, embracing two of them. "In the whole Pleasure District, no, in the entire New World, Who doesn't know you, Brother Kane? A girl giggled, tracing circles on his chest. You're the successor to the Pirate King. Sisters, isn't that right? Yes, the others chimed in, their flattery syrup-sweet and expertly practiced. But their usual lines backfired today. Kane's expression darkened immediately. That title was the last he wanted to hear. He dropped the casual act. Is Stussy here? He demanded. I need to see her. The message reached Stussy's private room on the bar's second floor quickly. The Calamity wants to see me? The stunning woman with short blonde hair mused, reclining on a leather sofa and holding a glass of wine as dark as fresh blood. What have they been doing since they arrived? She asked one of her aides. Her voice was languid and magnetic. The manager reported, in precise detail, everything the Raikugo had done since entering the pleasure district. The manager knew the island's purpose was more than profit. It was also a place for information and influence. Lustful? The manager suggested. Invite him up, Stussy said, smiling. This was her specialty, coaxing powerful men into comfort and carelessness. The long-term contact mission assigned by Gorosei could finally begin. The manager relayed Stussy's reply to Kane. Let's go, he said, tossing down a handful of berries. He wasn't one for free things, and followed the manager upstairs. On the second floor, in Stussy's exclusive private room, Kane finally met the Underworld Empress. As he entered, she opened a folding fan and concealed the lower half of her face, revealing only a pair of deep sapphire eyes. She studied him. He was as handsome as his bounty photo, but more than that, Kane's bearing was nothing like the brutal style of the Beast's pirates. He looked like a prince from somewhere far away. It's a pleasure to finally meet you, Mr. Kane, Stussy said, closing her fan. Her smile bloomed brilliant and disarming, dangerously sweet. Come, boy, she thought, immerse yourself in me. Just as she had planned, Kane stared at Stussy with a blank, almost petrified look. The read had been right. Stussy felt a private thrill ripple through her, confidence for the next move warming her like a secret torch. Then Kane smiled, a strange, indulgent smile. She's truly a peerless beauty, he said. To still look this good at 30, that's remarkable. The smile froze on Stussy's face. Her eyelids fluttered. She forced the composure back together like a cracked porcelain mask. Damn it, I'm only 29, she thought, vowing that if she weren't on a world government mission, she would gut him for that. Mr. Kane, she said in a deliberately light, chastising tone, a gentleman doesn't stare at a lady like that. Her eyes fluttered coquettishly. Her voice was all silk and slow warmth, designed to make a man's pulse stumble. Kane dropped himself into the sofa opposite and sighed. I never imagined such a charming beauty would turn into a wrinkled old woman like Miss Bakken in a few decades. It seemed in this world no beauty was spared time's cruelty. Stussy thought of Charlotte Linlin and Gloriosa, and the rare exceptions like Shaki. Her smile crumpled. He knows my origin. Did Queen tell him? But Queen wouldn't know I'm a clone of Miss Bakken, would she? It didn't matter. Once someone thinks they hold your secret, they relax. And that easing of caution was exactly the advantage Stussy needed. She forced her breath steady, tamped down the panic. Then Kane simply said, Let's talk about Vegapunk. His voice was calm. The words hit Stussy like a cold blade tracing her spine from the soles of her feet to the top of her head. She plastered a smile on, voice as airy as she could make it. Vegapunk's whereabouts are top secret to the world government. I don't know anything about that. Keep it together, she told herself. No one else knows about the doctor and me. She held herself with the practiced poise of a lady on stage, but Kane saw the fraying edges. He leaned forward, eyes fixed on hers, and smiled with a confidence that made her skin crawl. Is that so? I've heard you've always been his person. Stussy's jaw tightened. The truth behind that single line was complex. She was the first successful product of the Mads cloning project, a clone of Miss Bakken, and formerly a member of the Celestial Dragon's Secret Intelligence, the CPO. But she had been a double agent from the start, loyal to Vegapunk and his plans. Vegapunk, world famous for his genius in both science and strategy, had never let his guard down since the world government recruited him. He planned 10 steps ahead. Stussy had been one of his careful links. She began to protest, to argue nuance, but Kane raised an index finger and pressed it gently to her lips. Shh, he murmured, his smile never leaving his face. Don't deny it. I know more than you imagine. He sank back and planted his feet on the coffee table, deliberately relaxed, letting the silence pressure her. Stussie's panic was no longer subtle. It showed in the tremor at the edge of her voice. The doctor had insisted on single-line contact for her safety. How could Kane know so much? Kane unbothered. I'm not here to expose you. That was the comforting trap. Every undercover agent clung desperately to any sliver of hope. Kane added casually, if I truly wanted to hurt you in Vegapunk, I could pick up a Den Den Mushi and call the 5 and marry Geowace. He poured a glass of red wine and took a sip as if commenting on the weather. You understand the Gorosei better than I do, he said. They'd sooner wipe 1,000 innocents from the board than let one guilty player remain free. The implication hung there. The Gorosei wouldn't blink at sacrificing someone like a CPO agent, no matter how valuable her information. Compared to Vegapunk, collecting intelligence on Stussy was irrelevant. Stussy understood. She knew the stakes. Without hesitation, she knelt before him, grabbed his hand, and pressed her face into his palm as if seeking a lifeline. Her breath came in quick little gasps. She was at heart a master of using every advantage. She clung to his leg, the silk of her clothing a soft press against his trousers. Lord Kane, she whispered, voice shaking, if you'll keep this secret, I'll do anything. She lifted her head, eyes huge and wet with pleading. One hand cradled his left hand to her face, the other slid toward the forbidden place. Anything, she meant. If the world government discovered the doctor's secret safe havens, decades of work would be undone. Even if Vegapunk's brilliance kept him alive, surveillance would cinch so tight that his work would be strangled. Kane's face darkened. He shook off her hand and rose to his feet. I wanted to discuss serious business, he said with a sardonic edge. Can we put this aside for now? Stussy's eyes filled. Heavenly disaster. Kane had never lacked admirers. What was one more temptation worth? She took a breath, decided to play her last card, and slowly let her garment fall to the floor. Kane looked stunned for only a moment. Then, almost to himself, he said, a real man faces temptation head-on. Later, 2.5 hours later, when the small storm had passed and dust seemed to settle in the room, Kane lay back on the expansive sofa with Stussy curled against him, her cheeks flushed. Silence reigned briefly, the kind that follows an explosion of heat. Lord Kane, she asked, voice small and raw with hope, you really won't expose us? Kane shrugged, matter of fact. Of course not. I'm not on friendly terms with the world government either. Why would I ever help them? Stussy's mouth twitched at that, not sure whether to feel used or relieved. The sacrifice had felt like a negotiation, a bargain struck in the dark. In the end, though, the handsome man before her had not made her lose out entirely. Lord Kane, she murmured, eyes bright. I want more. At nearly 30, something in her had shifted. The plea was not just for secrecy anymore, but for something she hadn't known she wanted to ask for until she saw that brief, dangerous crack in Kane's reserve. Chapter 84. Leaving the Pleasure Quarter. In the blink of an eye, 5 hours slipped away. Here, Lord Kane, try this. Stussy, radiant and full of playful light, picked up a plump, glistening oyster and brought it to Kane's lips. Enough, enough, Kane said, already a little languid, waving his hand away. Let's talk about something serious. The coquettish smile vanished from Stussy's face as if she'd switched personas. She set down her chopsticks with an elegant motion and sat up straight. Kane, expression hardening, raised a finger. First, where is that Birdman Morgans? Stussy blinked. Morgans? How did he offend you? She asked cautiously. From the look on Kane's face, it was clear he wasn't trying to cozy up to the news king. Who told him to print nonsense in the paper? Kane snorted. Stussy thought for a moment, then a memory surfaced, the outrageous headline from not long ago. Oh. Mischief flickered in her eyes, and she couldn't resist teasing him. The Pirate King's successor. You know that, and you still say it? Kane shot back, annoyed. Stussy burst out laughing, shaking with mirth until she finally drew a breath and managed to compose herself. Morgans isn't staying on News Island right now, she said. Then where is he? Kane frowned. That worried him. Morgans had a knack for disappearing. Even if he still had a small island as a base, if he learned to float by hot air balloon in a few years, he'd be impossible to track. Stussy leaned back into Kane's arms, her body soft as if boneless, voice light and intimate. Do you know Guild Tesoro? A casino owner, Kane supplied. He's gained some fame over the last 2 years, I suppose. Kane considered it. The future Gold Emperor hadn't made his vast fortune yet. He'd only recently risen, collaborating with Doflamingo on casinos. If Kane remembered correctly, Tesoro was building a massive ship called Grand Tesoro. Its construction had even caused a small stir in the news. Compared to you, he's barely known. Stussy covered her mouth, chuckling with a hint of admiration. But in the underworld, he's a rising big shot. Tesoro's giant ship is finished, and he's preparing for the grand opening, she continued. He needs a lot of girls, so he came to me. He plans to turn the ship into the largest entertainment city in the world and invites influential people from everywhere for the opening. Morgan's is on that guest list. Seems they have some arrangement. Morgan's will definitely attend. Kane pinched Stussy's upturned nose, smiling despite himself. You're not worried he'll steal your business, and yet you're helping him. Who told him to pay so well? Stussy replied frankly. Tesoro's smart. Beyond his casino business, he's given shares in other entertainment projects to buy support. Otherwise, he wouldn't get so far. She named partners. Umit, the Sea King, Duffield, the Loan Shark King. Kane agreed. How else could a man who'd only come to prominence in the last 2 years afford to build a giant ship and turn it into a luxury city? Maybe even the world government had a hand in it. So why didn't he invite me? Kane asked, puzzled. Launching such a big move in the New World without notifying the Emperor Pirates? Whether they attended was secondary. The attitude mattered. Stussy guessed they're probably waiting for the opening date to be finalized. Kane nodded and moved on. Second matter. I need an inside man in the world government. Can you handle that? Stussy shook her head gently. She thought it almost too easy. After all his threats, this was what he wanted? He even knew about her relationship with the doctor and still needed her as a spy? She hesitated, then asked, Is that all? Kane raised an eyebrow, a half smile on his face. What, are you hoping I'll make more trouble for Dr. Vegapunk? Of course not. Stussy hurriedly denied, a thread of nervousness in her voice. Don't worry, until I can go toe-to-toe with a Gorosei and an admiral, I'm not going after Vegapunk. Kane smiled. He understood. Vegapunk, researching the Mother Flame, was the world government's most dangerous asset. Whoever touched him would find themselves crushed by the state. Even if Vegapunk's research finished, the world government would never allow it to be leaked. Kane wasn't arrogant enough to think he could take Vegapunk now, but one day, when he had defeated Kaido and fully absorbed the beast's pirate's power, the time might come. Stussy's eyes went wide with shocked realization. He actually planned to pry the doctor away someday? Knowing how valuable the doctor was to the world government, she didn't know whether to call him bold or reckless. Kane suddenly shifted the subject. Why are you willing to go so far for Vegapunk? Stussy's answer was simple, but heavy with feeling. Because the doctor gave me life. Kane shook his head slightly. In my view, raising someone, teaching them, giving them a soul and meaning, that matters more than the mere act of creating life. The doctor said the same thing. Stussy drifted into memory. When I was first cloned and created, the lab argued about how I should be used. Some wanted to treat me as experimental material, to squeeze every bit of data from me through extreme tests. Finally, the doctor made a decision. He said, She isn't a tool. Treat her as a person. A bright smile lit her face. He took me away. He let me see the real blue sky and smell flowers for the first time. He taught me knowledge, gave my life meaning. No matter what, even if it costs me my life, I will protect him. Understood, Kane said, nodding. He stood up, straightened his clothes, and with Stussy's respectful farewell, pushed open the private room door and strode back into the noisy lights and music of the bar, his figure quickly swallowed by the crowd. Chapter 85. Conflict with Nine Serpent Island. Nine Serpent Island sat hidden deep inside the calm belt. Massive nests of sea kings ringed the island like a natural death barrier, keeping most outsiders away. That isolation had kept the islanders' lives peaceful and stable for generations, but it came at a cost. Resources were scarce, and they produced almost nothing beyond what they needed. Most importantly, for reasons no one living could explain, the island had given birth only to girls for generations. To keep the line going, the people of Nine Serpent Island had to go to sea to find mates. Their solution was obvious: piracy. Thus, the Nine Serpent pirate crew was born, perhaps the oldest pirate crew in the sea, its history nearly as long as the kingdom itself. Every generation of Nine Serpent emperors set out on seafaring expeditions as a matter of course. The harsh, isolated life forged exceptional warriors. What made Nine Serpent Island notorious, besides the fact that nearly all its citizens were women, was their combat ability. Almost every one of them could use hockey, and many were masters of advanced forms. In the Grand Line, where hockey is scarce, that level of power was a staggering advantage. The island's ruler, who was also captain of the pirate crew, was even more formidable. Great ones rose generation after generation. The long-ago Emperor Gloriosa had once been a member of the Rock's Pirates. The emperor before that, Shaki, had unknown strength, but had a famous subordinate named Rayleigh, and the current empress, Boa Hancock, sat among the 7 warlords of the sea. Now, Nine Serpents' warriors had found uninvited guests. "Sister, pirates are coming!" Boa Sandersonia burst into the palace, green hair flying, panic on her face. Hancock lounged, impossibly beautiful, long black hair cascading down her back. She barely lifted an eyelid. Then kill them," she said flatly, as if choosing what to have for dinner. A red and white striped snake wearing a skull helmet coiled at her feet. Sensing its master's intent, it straightened and hissed. Beside Hancock, an elderly woman leaning on a staff carved into the form of a coiled snake frowned. "It won't be so simple, Hancock. Don't forget, this is the Calm Belt." Ordinary pirate ships couldn't cross the Calm Belt, let alone thread their way through the dense Sea King nests. "Huh? Do you think I'll lose?" Hancock tilted her head, then pointed downward with one finger. Gloriosa sighed. She had expected that answer. "Sandersonia, what flag are they flying?" Gloriosa asked. Sandersonia squinted, thinking. A skull with 2 horn-like projections, and a bone symbol behind it. Gloriosa's face drained of color as flags of powerful crews flashed through her mind. "The Beast Pirates," she said. "They're the Beast Pirates." How could they be here? If it was truly the Beast Pirates' flag, this was far more serious than a routine raid. The Emperor's crew didn't have to care about Shichibukai titles. They answered to much higher ambitions. Then the Raikugo finally came into sight, cutting through the Calm Belt toward Nine Serpent Island. The island rose like a cliffside carved into living stone. 9 enormous snake heads sculpted into a towering rock face, the words Nine Serpent carved across it. On the outer wall, a line of warriors stood ready, perched in full battle formation. They gripped strange, massive bows shaped from coiled snakes. Arrows were nocked, aimed at the approaching ship. Sanji's eyes turned into hearts the instant he saw the wall. "So many beautiful women," he breathed. Having just endured the chaos of the Pleasure District, he was thankfully calmer than before. Violet laughed and covered her mouth, shooting a look at Kane. "Lord Kane, your male charm won't work here." "I'm not made of berries. I can't be liked by everyone," Kane replied with a frank chuckle. They didn't have time for flirtation. On the wall, the 9 Serpent warriors had no intention of negotiating. "Fire!" came the command. A swarm of arrows, blackened with armament hockey, tore through the air like a storm. "Kuma," Kane said. Kuma stepped forward, face serene. He spread his arms, palms out. A translucent bubble snapped into being and expanded in an instant. Arrow after arrow slammed into it, but instead of piercing through, they sank into the bubble's wall as if into viscous tar, slowed to a near stop, and stuck there at different depths. Then Kuma thrust his hands forward. The bubble shot outward, and the embedded arrows were hurled back. "Watch out!" The 9 Serpent warriors shouted as their own hockey-coated bolts returned toward them. They scrambled to defend and dodge. Taking advantage of the confusion, the Raikugo made landfall. "It feels good to be on solid ground again," Kane said, stretching as smoke from the skirmish still drifted in the air. Far off, the 9 Serpent warriors were already rallying and charging. "Is it time to fight?" Yamato's excitement crackled in her voice. "Freeze them. Don't kill anyone," Kane said casually. He had not come to make enemies today, but a demonstration of force was necessary. "Leave it to me," Yamato grinned and charged, club in hand. Horse illusion blade. A blade of chilling frost burst from her swing. The 9 Serpent fighters barely had time to react. An icy wind washed over them, and in seconds, dozens were encased in crystal-clear ice, frozen in mid-motion. Lifelike sculptures of women in battle stances, glittering on the sand. Hancock arrived then, leading more warriors. Seeing the frozen figures strewn across the beach, her rage flared. Warriors, charge! A terrifying aura rolled out from Hancock. Hao Shoku Haki, the color of the Supreme King, pulsing from her and sweeping toward Kane's group. Finally, an opponent worthy of me, she announced. Yamato's eyes lit up. She didn't shrink from the challenge. An equally potent surge of Hao Shoku burst from her, colliding with Hancock's. The two auras crashed like titans, the air itself seeming to shudder. Violet's head spun. They've got Hao Shoku too? She blurted. I thought that was 1 in a million talent. It seemed everywhere they turned, someone else wielded the rare ability. 3 people on their ship, Kane, Kuma, Yamato, already had it. If she knew what Kane was thinking, she'd note there was also an unawakened Zoro among them, and maybe someday Sanji too. On the shore, the frozen 9 serpent warriors sparkled under a strange sky, while Hancock and Yamato squared off, 2 proud warriors meeting in a clash that was only beginning. Chapter 86, Yamato versus Hancock. On the other side, the already boiling hot Yamato could no longer hold back. Club raised, wrapped in purple-black arcs of electricity, she launched herself like a cannonball. Thunder Bagua! Hancock answered in an instant. Her long, perfect right leg was sheathed in pitch-black armament haki. With a sharp whoosh, she carved a deadly arc from low to high. Perfume Femur. Their attacks met, Hancock's toe against Yamato's club. The impact cracked like thunder, and both warriors were thrown back by the clash. Yamato staggered 2 paces farther than Hancock. Yamato lost? Kazuki Hiyori covered her mouth, disbelief written on her face. Reiju's eyes were equally wide. Even though Yamato had been somewhat hidden beneath the presence of heavenly disaster Kane, everyone aboard the ship knew she was a monster in her own right. On the Raikugo, she was someone who aimed for second place, at least third. But her bounty is only 89 million berries, Violet mumbled. Judging a fighter by their bounty is the most foolish thing on this sea, Kane snapped. There are many unknown experts out there. If you think otherwise, you'll pay for it. Kane wasn't surprised Yamato had lost the initial trade. Setting aside any overpowered quirks of the love-love fruit, Hancock herself was a force to be reckoned with. Crowned Empress of Amazon Lily at 18 and summoned by the world government to join the warlords on her first expedition, she had likely been honed into a combatant during her time as a slave in Mary Geoise, perhaps even specially trained by the celestial dragons. That would explain the enormous leap in strength in a short time. Impressive. Far from discouraged, Yamato's eyes burned with an even fiercer light. The warrior blood that ran through her veins flared. Like her father Kaido, she craved a true, brutal fight. Warm-up's over. I'm going all out. A low growl escaped Yamato. An icy aura burst around her. White fur sprouted along her skin, fangs sharpened at her lips, and she transformed into a white wolfman. Hancock's gaze sharpened. A mythical zone? Hancock lightly touched her lips and shaped a small, peach-colored heart. Pistol kiss. She tapped it with her fingertip. The heart tore through the air like a bullet. A shrill whoosh aimed straight at Yamato's face. Divine stride. White serpent strike. Yamato accelerated in her wolf form and vanished from her spot as if teleporting. The peach heart missed and detonated in a charred crater where she'd stood. At the same time, Yamato's club, dripping with a bone-chilling frost, slammed down with crushing force toward Hancock. Hancock had nowhere to flee. Her eyes narrowed, and in a fluid motion, she fired her leg up like a spring. The collision thundered again. Frost burst from Yamato's club and wrapped around Hancock's body. The kick drove her back. Before the chill could fully bite into her, Hancock touched her lips again, summoning a giant pink peach heart. Grasping it with both hands as if pulling a great bow, she let it fly. Slave arrow! Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Scores of pink hearts shot toward Yamato like a storm, covering so much sky they threatened to cut off every path of escape. Horse illusion blade. Yamato swung her club in a sweeping arc, releasing a condensed, freezing slash like an ice river to intercept them. Crack, crack, crack. The moment the cold struck the pink arrows, they grayed, solidified into stone, and plummeted uselessly to the ground. Yamato's eyes widened at the transformation. She then swung her club again and shattered the petrified hearts. Fighting this Empress and you still have the leisure to gawk? Hancock's forehead vein throbbed. She crossed her hands and formed a heart shape. Marrow, marrow, marrow. Sweet, sweet beam! A massive pink heart-shaped beam burst from her hands. It swept across the battlefield, not only toward Yamato, but also over Kane and the others watching behind her. The 9 serpent warriors erupted in triumphant shouts. Anyone touched by the Empress's beauty would be turned into stone, women included. They had never seen anyone completely immune to this move. Their cheer died a strangled death. The crowd stared, mouths agape. Some of the invaders did indeed become stone statues, but 4 figures remained fully mobile. What happened? Yamato looked down, feeling nothing wrong. But those who had been turned, Hiyori and the others, were frozen in place. They were affected by the Mero Mero no Mi, Kane explained, relief and tension mingling in his voice. He had preemptively cloaked himself in haki and avoided being frozen, though he still felt a stiffness creep through his limbs. No wonder Blackbeard, upon capturing Hancock, had constantly suppressed her with his dark fruit. Even a momentary stiffness could decide a battle between masters. Kane scanned the battlefield. His side had been largely wiped out. Only 2 fighters remained intact. Kuma, whose heart apparently belonged only to his daughter Bonnie, and Zoro, whose devotion to bladecraft left room for nothing else. That was roughly what he had expected. Hancock's confident demeanor shattered. How could so many appear who weren't overcome by her beauty? Good opportunity. Yamato didn't hesitate. She surged forward. Ice blade slash! Raising her club, she brought it down like a thunderbolt. Hancock snapped back, cloaking her right leg in armament haki. Twisting her waist, she swung a perfect semicircular kick upward to meet the club. Great perfume femur, boom! The impact gouged the earth into a deep pit. Haki lightning spat and leapt around the collision. Hancock was knocked back, shaken by the sheer force. For the first time, a harsh, worried expression cut across her gorgeous face. This strength, this was not the Hancock the world had known. Yamato executed a somersault, landed, and charged again without pausing. Dragon's roaring army. Her club became a blinding white storm that hammered at Hancock in a furious barrage. Hancock gritted her teeth and met the assault with a flurry of kicks, each one perfectly timed to parry. The ground trembled. Gales whipped across the battlefield, forcing the 9 serpent warriors to squint against the flying debris. Grandma Nyan, it looks like my sister. Sandersonia told the old woman beside her with growing alarm. Gloriosa's face was grave. Though aged and frail now, her seasoned eyes read the fight clearly. Hancock's petrification power wasn't working on these enemies, and in a straight strength contest, the odds did not favor the Empress. They were still locked in close combat because the gap wasn't enormous, but as the exchange went on, Hancock's defeat was an increasing possibility. What worried Gloriosa most was that Heavenly Disaster Kane had not yet intervened, and it was already too late to summon help from Shakuyaku or Silver's Rayleigh. Chapter 87. The Battle Ends. Flaming Flower, is it all right if I call you that? A calm, confident male voice spoke at Gloriosa's side without warning. Who? Gloriosa startled, hair rising on end. She hadn't noticed him approach. Intruder! The 9 serpent warriors around her reacted instantly, weapons raised, arrows and snake-headed spears all pointed at the newcomer. Stand down, everyone, he said. Gloriosa forced a steadying breath and waved a hand to lower the tension. As a veteran who had once sailed with the Rock's pirates, she knew what a monster like Kane could do. Ordinary attacks would be useless. She let out a wry sigh. Heh! I didn't expect anyone in this era to remember my old nickname. A complicated, unreadable look crossed her face briefly, then she composed herself. Call me Granny Nyan. Flaming Flower is a name of the past. Kane's expression softened a little at that. His willingness to speak made it clear he hadn't come to destroy 9 Serpent Island. He smiled faintly. Then, Granny Nyan, shall we talk cooperation? Cooperation? Gloriosa feigned confusion, frowning. The 9 serpent pirates are Shichibukai, recognized by the Marines. We can't risk allying with an Emperor's crew. Kane's tone remained steady and unnervingly perceptive. We both know why the Marines gave you the Shichibukai title. 9 Serpent Island sits deep within the Calm Belt. It's easy to defend and hard to attack. A full-scale assault would be too costly, so they accepted a peaceful arrangement. He leaned in, voice sharpening. But have you ever considered what happens if the Marines develop a way to cross the Calm Belt safely and on a large scale? Gloriosa's hand tightened on her serpent staff, knuckles whitening. Does such a technology exist? Kane nodded. Yes, embedding sea stone into ship hulls. Vegapunk has almost completed the research. At the name Vegapunk, Gloriosa's skepticism faded. She had heard of him years ago. Even then, his inventions had been astonishing. Sea stone keels, by comparison, were terrifyingly plausible. Even so, she said, searching for options, we have allies. Shaki, Rayleigh. Kane cut her down coldly. They're old. Their prime is long past. Two aging fighters can't defend your entire island. Gloriosa closed her eyes. For a long moment, she looked old beyond her years. When she opened them, resolve had replaced helplessness. What do you want? What do you offer? Negotiating with cunning people was simple, Kane thought, and he smiled. When Nine Serpent Island faces a crisis, I will protect you. In return, when that time comes, Nine Serpent Island will join the Beast Pirates. Gloriosa weighed the offer. And our status? Equal partners or subordinates? That depends on your empress, Kane said with a playful curl to his mouth. The sea respects strength. She had little reason to refuse, she admitted inwardly. I'm not the empress anymore. Hancock must decide. Understood. I'll persuade her. Kane radiated confidence that made Gloriosa blink. Where did it come from? Hancock was proud to the point of arrogance. Would Kane win her over with charm alone? Meanwhile, the battle was reaching its end. Extreme Ice 8 trigrams. Yamato's arm bulged as she slammed the spiked club, laced with bone-deep frost, toward Hancock. The recent collisions and Yamato's freezing aura had already weakened Hancock. She was half a beat too slow. That sliver of time decided everything. The blow caught Hancock. She froze like a statue and was sent tumbling through the air. "Sister!" rang out from the crowd. Hancock crashed down, ice cracking and scattering. She fought to rise, to continue the battle, but a solid iron club loomed over her, an overwhelming pressure filling her senses. The wind from the swing whipped her hair. Despairingly, she closed her eyes, bracing for a crushing blow that might split her skull. But the expected pain never came. The tip of that spiked club came to a steady stop on her pale forehead. "Heh, you lost," Yamato chuckled. Hancock opened her beautiful eyes to the white wolf-featured warrior standing over her, smiling. The realization hit her like ice. She had truly been defeated. Even if some strength remained, the outcome was decided. A new humiliation and frustration washed over her, unprecedented for the proud empress. "Sister!" Sandersonia and Marigold rushed forward at once, holding the staggering Hancock between them. Gloriosa hurried over, voice low, and relayed Kane's proposal and the potential future of the Marine's Calm Belt technology. "No!" Hancock shrieked reflexively, face twisting with disgust and defiance. "No man is any good." "Empress," Gloriosa urged, trying to be practical, "this isn't the time for vanity. If the worst happens and the Calm Belt's protection is lost, Nine Serpent Island will be wiped out." "That will never happen," Hancock declared petulantly, cupping her exquisite face. "This Empress is too beautiful. Whatever I do, I will be forgiven." "Empress Snake is right," the Nine Serpent warriors cried, their infatuation instantly renewed. Their eyes became hearts as they shouted in unison, fanatic and devoted. The battlefield quieted around that fervor. Battered, exhausted fighters, alliances in flux, and a new, dangerous possibility looming on the horizon. The battle had ended, but the larger struggle for Nine Serpent Island's future was just beginning. Chapter 88, Reaching a Partnership. "Hancock, you!" Gloriosa stormed forward, furious and ready to argue again, but Hancock cut her off sharply. "Shut up!" Hancock's eyes flashed. "Don't forget, you, who once abandoned the country, have no right to tell me what to do. Old hag, I am the king of Amazon Lily. You'll regret this, Hancock." Gloriosa let out a long sigh. "Shall we talk?" Kane stepped through the crowd and appeared beside Hancock, as if from nowhere. Hancock was about to brusquely drive away the man she disliked, but his words hit her like a thunderclap. Kane's voice was low and clear, carrying the power to shatter pride. "It must have been painful for all these years, right? Because of the mark of the hoof of the celestial dragon on your back." Boom. That single sentence landed harder than all of Yamato's attacks combined. Hancock froze as if struck by lightning, her body trembling. How do you know? I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. In an instant, she reverted to the terrified little girl curled in the dungeons of Mary Geois. Her arrogance melted, and she began to babble. "No, this must never be revealed. Everything would be ruined. Panic made her act without hesitation. She kicked out with her left foot at Kane. "Your heart is in disarray," Kane said calmly. Before the words finished, his right hand, black as night, had closed around Hancock's slender but formidable ankle. "Damn it!" she hissed. Hancock ground her silver teeth and tried to pull free and strike with her other leg. "I can get rid of that mark," she said desperately. Kane's voice was gentle, a second thunderclap that exploded in her chaotic mind. Her right leg would not lift. She stared at him, incredulous, her blue eyes wide with surprise and a faint glimmer of hope she hadn't known she still harbored. She searched his face for deceit or mockery, but found only sincerity. "Trust me, okay?" Kane's gaze was honest. Then, to Hancock's shock, he relaxed his hold on her left ankle and stepped back, making no defensive move, giving her room. Hancock stood frozen, blank with indecision. The temptation to erase that shameful, painful past overwhelmed the deep, instinctive fear and aversion she felt toward men. She bowed her head, her voice barely a whisper. If you truly can do that, I will reluctantly form an alliance with you." Kane's mouth curved into a small, knowing smile. "In that case, please do me the favor of first restoring my companions from petrification." "Humph, don't order me around." Hancock pouted momentarily, but then obediently removed the petrification, holding Kozuki Hiyori and the others. Hiyori, Violet, Reiju, and the rest shed the gray pallor of stone and color, returned to their skin as they flexed stiff limbs, cautious and bewildered. Gloriosa's eye twitched uncontrollably at the scene. The sight was all too familiar. It was the unmistakable sign of a nine-snake maiden falling in love. She could only hope Hancock wouldn't abandon the entire nation for love as she and Shaki had, and at least leave an heir for Nine Snake Island if she did. "Is it all settled? No more fighting?" Violet patted her chest and let out a relieved breath. She glanced at Hancock, who wore a strange expression and showed a faint flush, then at Kane, calm and composed as ever. With a mischievous smile, she nudged Hiyori and lowered her voice. "Hey, Hiyori, do you think Lord Kane used a honey trap to win the Empress? I knew he liked collecting noble beauties." Even Violet, a woman, felt her heart skip a beat at the sight of Hancock's breathtaking beauty. She didn't think Kane would pass up such a prize. Hancock was the pirate empress, famed as the most beautiful woman in the world. A sharp knock landed on Violet's forehead. "Ouch!" she cried, clutching her head and glaring at Kane, who had appeared behind her. "Don't think I can't hear you just because you whisper," he grumbled. Violet stuck out her tongue and made a face. After years with the beast's pirates, she was no longer the trembling princess of Dressrosa. With the truce sealed and a partnership formed, the next step, according to pirate custom, was obvious: a banquet. Kane and his group were invited into Nine Snake Island. The island lay like a bowl, wrapped by towering, sheer cliffs with only a few narrow, hidden passages connecting it to the outside world. Passing through the passage opened up the view: stretches of farmland, a scattering of small villages, and the central royal city. Though called a royal city, its size was more like a large town. Space was scarce. Skilled craftsmen had carved countless dwellings into the surrounding cliffs like honeycomb cells, creating a striking three-dimensional architectural complex. As rare male visitors, Kane and his companions immediately drew every eye the moment they entered the city. Look, why are their chests so flat? Idiot, they must be the legendary men." "What? They're men!" "So this is what men look like." The maidens, most of whom had never left the island, chattered and pointed openly, their curiosity untempered by romance. Their bright, unassuming gazes regarded Kane and the others like strange creatures in a zoo. Normally, such attention would have pleased any man, but the Amazon's innocent curiosity was almost invasive. Even Kane felt a little uncomfortable under so many stares. Kuma and Zoro, taciturn as ever, wanted only to hide. The only one reveling in it was Sanji, whose eyes filled with hearts as he imagined approaching every one of the beauties to be inspected up close. Once they had escaped the maiden's scrutiny, Kane and his group entered the royal palace. Despite the island's isolation, rare ingredients were not unknown, and combined with spoils from raids, the banquet spread was sumptuous. Sanji abandoned gawking at the beauties long enough to trade cooking tips with the palace chef. "This is a poisonous mushroom," the chef explained as Sanji took notes. "If eaten raw, It draws vitality from the body and causes malicious growths, but when expertly prepared, it becomes a rare delicacy. The others ate their fill and enjoyed the fare. After 2.5 hours of revelry, the banquet finally concluded. Chapter 89, Rusakaina Island. After the banquet, Kane finally revealed the real reason for his trip. I heard there's an island near Nine Snake Island that's full of ferocious giant beasts. Gloriosa paused, then nodded. That's right, it's to our northeast, Rusakaina Island. But, Lord Kane, how do you even know about that place? Her eyes showed genuine puzzlement. This was deep in the Calm Belt. Outsiders hardly knew it existed except from the navigation records passed down on Nine Snake Island. I have my sources. Kane brushed off the question lightly. I need the beasts on that island. You won't object, will you? Please, go ahead. Gloriosa did not hesitate. Even if you clear out that entire island, it wouldn't matter. If Kane could clear the beasts away, Nine Snake Island would effectively gain a fertile new territory with far fewer dangers. Rusakaina was a hazardous place even the 9 serpent warriors rarely dared tread. Kane smiled and nodded. He did plan to clear Rusakaina, but not in the way Gloriosa imagined. If the Beasts Pirates didn't have beasts, could they still be called the Beasts Pirates? Those were 500 ferocious creatures that had once forced Luffy to use Gear 4. Kane suspected that in the original story the Gifter's army, relying on artificial devil fruits, might not have matched those beasts one-on-one. Of course, things were different now. Judge's artificial devil fruits used the lineage factors of those beasts directly. Speaking of which, where was Golden Lion hiding and researching IQ plants now? The beasts Golden Lion had tinkered with probably weren't even as good as the ones already roaming Rusakaina. What rotten luck for the old man. The next day, Rusakaina Island. This uninhabited little island was unusually busy for once. Woohoo! Fenrir, charge! In a clearing in the dense forest, a girl with 2 horns rode on the back of a huge white wolf, laughing like the chime of silver bells as they cut through the trees. It was a picture of harmony between human and nature, if you ignored the fresh welts on the wolf's head and its watery, aggrieved eyes. Bonnie watched eagerly, clutching Kuma's pant leg, her upturned face full of longing. That's too dangerous. Kuma was about to refuse, but seeing his daughter's bright eyes, he relented. All right, but only for a little while. Yay! Daddy's the best! Bonnie hugged his calf happily, and father and daughter went off to find their favorite little animals. Kane did not worry. The moment he set foot on the island, he swept it with his observation haki. There might be creatures that could even threaten Kuma, but Kane could at least guarantee his own safety. A deafening roar suddenly thundered from deep in the forest. The sound wave shook branches and sent flocks of birds scattering. Kane's brow lifted. Someone big had arrived. Dust rolled in the distance, and the ground trembled. A huge black shape, like a moving hill, charged toward them with speed that belied its mass. A lion, a giant lion, over 50 meters tall, its muscles knotted and body scarred. It roared, an earth-shattering proclamation of dominance. Rusakaina hosted top-tier beasts, ones Luffy had to use Gear 4 to beat, and this lion was one of them. Kane suspected it was the source of Luffy's lion bazooka. Ace, Sanji, Zoro, want to give it a try? Kane stroked his chin, a smile of interest on his lips. Couldn't ask for more. Zoro's eyes flared with battle lust. He bit his Wado Ichimonji between his teeth, drew his other 2 long swords with a clang, set them behind him in an open stance, and shot forward like an arrow loosed from a bow. 3-sword style, tiger hunt. His blades sliced through the air, aimed straight for the lion's head. Metal met hide with a ringing clash. Zoro's swords failed to pierce the lion's skin, leaving nothing but a few shallow white marks and a scattering of fur. So hard. His pupils narrowed. He tried to pull back, but the lion reacted with terrifying speed. A massive paw, like a shadow covering the sky and carrying the force to smash boulders, slammed down toward Zoro as if swatting a fly. A suffocating blast of wind accompanied it. Bang! Zoro managed to cross his 3 swords in front of him, but it was no use. He was thrown like a rag, sent skidding across the ground. His body gouged a deep trench tens of meters long before he finally stopped, blood at the corner of his mouth. Mosshead, you're pathetic. Sanji sneered when he saw Zoro breathing and still alive. Next. It's my turn. Ace couldn't hold back and darted forward, only to be flung back faster, landing right beside Zoro in a spray of dust. The two lay together in disgrace. Sanji flicked a cigarette free, lit it, and drew in a long drag. His eyes sharpened. "Big brother Kane, I'll prove I'm the strongest rookie under you." "Third-rate mints," he shouted as he flipped through the air and launched a flurry of kicks at the lion's forehead. The blows landed and made the beast flinch. It felt real pain and howled its fury. The little humans were an irritating swarm. The lion's paw came down again, faster than expected. Bang! Sanji barely raised his right leg to block, but the gap in power was huge. He too was slammed into the earth, left with a human-sized imprint. Fortunately, with his exoskeleton fully awakened, his defense had improved, and he clung to the edge of consciousness. Cough! Cough! Sanji struggled to rise, but Kane had already walked over and gently patted his shoulder. "All right, you lot aren't ready for that one yet. Grow up a few more years." With that, Kane stood and looked steadily at the raging lion. The beast, provoked and snarling, felt the man's gaze like a tangible pressure. Its instincts told it this opponent was not to be trifled with. Yet the pride of the island's overlord rose up immediately. This was its territory. Who but an equal could make it yield? The lion's fear was swallowed by its kingly arrogance. Chapter 90. Preparing to move the island. Roar! The lion's roar split the sky, its colossal voice shaking the whole island. From the south, west, north, and center of the island, 4 other powerful presences were instantly alert, eyes flicking toward the east with surprise and apprehension. Kane watched the enraged giant beast before him, a playful smirk slowly forming on his lips. Then, with a pale, slender hand pressed to the lion's chest, he whispered, "Dragon Claw!" An invisible battering ram of force struck the lion. Trees snapped like twigs with explosive cracks as the giant beast's body was hurled hundreds of meters. Ancient trunks, thicker than a man's embrace, were sheared in two along its path. Dust boiled skyward, clearing a wide, empty corridor. When the haze settled, the lion lay sprawled on the ground, wheezing like a bellows, unable to rise. Kane strode toward it with the calm menace of a demon god, stepping over scattered splinters and broken limbs. The lion ignored the pain and scrambled up, retreating deeper into the forest. "Too late to run now, isn't it?" Kane's voice rang out, and he vanished from where he stood. In an instant, he reappeared on the lion's crown, crouched and casually patting its coarse mane as if soothing a pet. "Submit or die, your choice." Beasts of that scale were far from mindless. Kane knew it would understand. After a moment's struggle between pride and survival, the lion's will to live won. It lowered its massive frame, pressed its head to the ground, and let out a low, fawning purr. "Good boy." Kane smiled and ruffled its mane. "Now take me to meet your friends. I'm looking forward to them." The lion bobbed its head eagerly. Those others were hardly friends. Territorial rivals the lion had fought to the death, but the beast was relieved to have someone else feel the squeeze of Kane's little games. If the lion had to suffer, maybe the others would too. A few hours later, on Rusukena Island's east coast, 5 titans stood assembled. A giant lion, ape, snake, elephant, and rhinoceros. The 5 rulers of the island had never gathered like this, and they weren't fighting. Except for the lion, which seemed relatively composed, each of the others bore a bright red bump on its forehead. Kane stood before them, a tiny figure against mountain-sized forms, but his presence made them hold their breath. "Remember what I said," he warned. "Obey, and you'll live comfortably. Disobey." His gaze turned icily cold. The 5 rulers bowed their massive heads so hard the ground trembled, like schoolchildren being scolded. "Yes, Lord Kane," they rumbled. "Done with your business?" Someone called cheerfully. A giant python slid in, its belly swollen from a recent feast, carrying a lively figure on its back. Yamato hopped off with a grin. "You're riding a snake now?" Kane raised an eyebrow at the enormous serpent under her feet. "This island's full of surprises." Yamato launched into an excited rundown of her jungle sightseeing. Fenrir got gored by the Minotaur was bitten by the Hydra, and Pegasus? Pegasus was swallowed by Jormungandr. Kane's mouth twitched. Yamato had somehow managed to skewer both Greek and Norse mythologies in one breath. Kozuki Hiyori approached with a worried crease between her brows as she eyed the 5 towering beasts. "Lord Kane, I'm afraid the Raikugo can't transport creatures of that size." "Of course not," Kane nodded. The Raikugo was a 100-meter class ship. None of the 5 rulers were below 50 meters. He couldn't shrink them, but he hadn't planned to load them onto his ship himself. The Beast Pirates had their own transport expert. Kane picked up a Den Mushi without hesitation. On the other end, Kaido's voice erupted like a thunderclap. "You damn brat! What did you think I'm a porter?" The Den Mushi mimicked Kaido's fury so well, it seemed as if spittle might spray from the receiver. Kane calmly wiped away the non-existent spray and smiled. "They're hundreds of beasts, only a little weaker than headliners. A few are strong enough to contend with the numbers." Silence crackled through the line for a few seconds, then Kaido roared, impatient and intrigued. "Lie to me, and I'll make you regret it." Kane pressed his advantage. "Also," he hurried out the final point before Kaido cut him off, "they'll be useful." Kaido snarled, half amused, half exasperated. "Troublesome brat, you're the only one who would order me around like this." He neither promised nor refused outright. It was as good as a deal. A few days later, Kane and his group returned to Rusukana, choosing to wait offshore rather than land. From the cloud line, a vast, elongated dark silhouette resolved into a ferocious dragon head peering from the mists. Kaido descended onto the Raikugo's deck in human form, landing with the kind of presence that made the sea itself seem to bow. "You've worked hard," Kane said, stepping forward to greet him. "Kane Lando!" 2 tiny voices cried in unison. On Kaido's broad shoulders sat Princess Mancheri and her guard, Leo. Take these noisy things away," Kaido said, arms folded and expressionless. "Of course," Kane replied, scooping up the 2 small Tontada tribe members. They were his wild cards for gaining favor with Hancock. Up close, Princess Mancheri's face was pale, not so much from fear of Kaido as from travel weariness. Kaido snorted. "You better pray I get a satisfactory result," he grumbled. "Don't worry," Kane answered with a faint, confident smile. "This won't be a wasted trip." Chapter 91, Eradicating the Hoof of the Celestial Dragon, Hancock's Future. On the Raikugo, while Kaido was inspecting Liscana Island, Kane quietly led Princess Mancheri to a small, secluded cabin. The Boa sisters were already gathered there, anxiety written on their faces. "Lord Kane." Hancock's voice trembled almost imperceptibly. Her eyes, normally full of proud hauteur, were now clouded with uncertainty. Can this really be done? She had wanted, for years, to erase the hoof of the celestial dragon from her back, a mark of endless humiliation. Now that the possibility was within reach, disbelief and fear clutched at her heart. What if it was only a dream? "Don't worry, Princess Mancheri will heal you," Kane said calmly and with certainty. The little princess in his arms nodded vigorously. I believe you," Hancock managed. She took a steadying breath, turned, and unbuttoned her kongsam. Her long black hair swept forward, exposing the brand she had never shown to any outsider, a claw-shaped pattern made of a central circle and 4 triangles, the hoof of the celestial dragon. Hancock closed her eyes and lay down on the soft bed, her body tense with nervous anticipation, awaiting whatever fate would bring. "Please, Princess Mancheri," Kane whispered. Leave it to me." Mancheri's face was solemn. Kane had explained to her that this was not merely removing a mark, but healing a deeply wounded soul. The little princess lightly leapt onto Hancock's pale back. She drew a breath, and crystal-clear tears, like perfect pearls, fell from her wide eyes. Drip, drop, drip, drop. Those teardrops, charged with miraculous healing power, fell on the brand. In an instant, the mark, symbol of humiliation and 1,000 private sorrows, began to fade and dissolve, as if snow melting in spring. It disappeared before their eyes until Hancock's skin was smooth and unblemished. "Sister, it worked!" Marigold was the first to react, clutching her hands to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Hancock shot up to a dressing mirror. In the glass, the back that had once held endless pain was flawless, as if new. "It's true. It's really gone." She touched the healed skin with trembling fingers. Joy, long pent up, broke through all her defenses. Years of shame, pain, and fear turned into a flood of hot tears. Hancock fell into Kane's arms, burying her tear-stained face against his chest and sobbing openly. She had been reborn. 10 minutes later, with Mancheri's aid, Sandersonia and Marigold also had their brands removed. The 3 sisters clung to one another, crying tears of joy. On Nine Snake Island, the legend of the Boa sisters found a new chapter. When Kane and the others left the cabin with the restored sisters, Kaido finished his inspection. In the sky, the enormous form of his azure dragon reappeared. Scarlet flame clouds gathered, coiling and spiraling around the island at his will. Rumble. The whole island seemed to groan. The ground trembled violently. The sea around Laskaina surged as if a giant hand had pushed at it, waves sloshing outward in great swells. The island moved. Sandersonia pointed upward, stunned. Can a human do this? That was the work of the strongest transporter, Golden Lion with the float fruit, who could manipulate islands and even the surrounding sea. Kane thought about logistics and sent Princess Manchuri and Leo back up to Kaido's great dragon head. Come back quick, boy. The new world isn't a peaceful place anymore, Kaido rumbled with heavy dragon eyes. Understood, Kane replied, then added, don't forget to look for the dumpling berry. It should be near Wasa village. There were few intelligent beasts on Laskaina. Most were instinctive brutes. Training them one by one would be slow and wasteful. Professional work deserved a devil fruit with professional abilities. Tama had found the dumpling berry. Given her roaming range, it shouldn't be hard to narrow down its location. Humph. Where do you get such strange information, boy? Kaido snorted, but said no more. He twisted his dragon body and bore the island back the way they'd come. Soon the dragon and its island vanished into the heavens. Just then, the Den Mushi in Kane's hands rang. He answered, and in the receiver a face with red sunglasses and a self-satisfied grin flickered into view. My good friend, are you interested in attending the grand opening of the world's largest entertainment city? Doflamingo's voice was sharp and mocking. Kane chuckled. If it's an invitation from Joker himself, I won't miss it. Foo. Doflamingo's laughter brimmed with smug delight. Then it's settled. I look forward to our meeting in a week. I promise you, it will be paradise. The Den Mushi clicked off. Lord Kane, are you leaving now? Hancock's whole body froze. The color drained from her face. Of course, Kane shrugged, composed. My business on Nine Snake Island is done. It's time to set sail. Lord Kane, can you stay? Hancock blurted, her hands twisting the hem of her kongsam, her expression oddly flushed. Violet crossed her arms and snorted. Reiju and Kazuki Hiyori exchanged helpless smiles. Kane's presence had a way of stirring more than a few hearts. Yamato stepped forward, a frown of possessiveness on her face, and gripped Kane's sleeve. Ridiculous. Kane's traveling with me. How could he stay on this little island forever? Wow, is there going to be a fight? Bonnie's eyes flashed. She waved her tiny fists, almost cheering. I want to see blood flow like a river. Bonnie, be a lady. Kuma sighed and rubbed his forehead. Ever since he'd been healed, the child's violent impulses seemed to flare more often. Now she kept calling for fights. He'd expected gentleness, not unending brawling. Boring, Ace yawned, chin in his hand. Women are too troublesome. He'd rather run laps around the deck than engage in delicate social squabbles. Zoro nodded agreement and closed his eyes, sword at his side. Sanji, meanwhile, wore an envious grin. As expected of Lord Kane, he so easily stole the heart of the world's most beautiful woman. Ha! Reiju, Kozuki Hiyori, and Violet snapped at once, targeting Sanji with 3 cold glares. He shrank back, sweating. On this ship, he was unquestionably the younger brother. Hancock, as if a switch had been flipped, instantly resumed her imperious posture. She tilted her head back, one index finger pointed down, radiating overbearing confidence. You common, vulgar women are not worthy of Lord Kane at all. She cupped her spectacular face and glowered at Yamato and the rest with undisguised superiority. Only I am worthy of a magnificent man like Lord Kane. She even blushed at the thought, her fantasy running ahead to imagine names for their future children. Reiju, Kozuki Hiyori, and Violet's tolerance snapped. As attractive women themselves, they were not about to be dismissed. The atmosphere threatened to erupt into a full brawl. Kane stepped in decisively. If he was going to have admirers lining up, he'd better be able to handle the consequences. He had no intention of becoming the sort of fool who fled his problems. Hancock, his voice sincere. I'm honored by your favor, truly. Hancock's chest swelled with joy. But I can't stay here. My journey lies across this vast, boundless ocean. My goal is to stand at the summit of this sea and unite it, to conquer the world. Conquer the world? Hancock stammered, eyes wide. Of course, the celestial dragons will be overthrown and crushed. Kane said without hesitation. The Boa sisters nearly fainted. The celestial dragons had ruled for 800 years, but Kane had spoken plainly. Hancock felt a rush of exhilaration. The color flooded her cheeks. "It's decided. I'll go to sea with Lord Kane," she declared, clenching her fists. "No." Sandersoni and Marigold lunged and hugged her, one on either side. "Sister, don't be rash. Amazon Lily still needs its empress. The people of Nine Snake Island can't do without you." If Gloriosa were there, she would have recognized the scene. Love had driven maidens off before. But a Nine Snake's determination for love was a force few could halt. "Let go. No one can stop me." Hancock's face darkened and a dangerous pressure radiated from her. Had it not been for her sister's embrace, she might have struck out. "Okay, Hancock," Kane said, taking her arm gently. "Calm down and listen." He became serious. "Nine Snake Island needs you. Your people need their empress. Moreover, I need you to remain in your position as one of the 7 warlords of the sea." Hancock blinked. She was, after all, a Shichibukai appointed by the Marines. If she openly defected to the Beast Pirates, it would be a public affront to the Marines and would draw their ire. Even the Gorosei might not tolerate a force that seemed to be growing into another Rocks Pirates. Kane had other calculations as well. The Raikugo-centered force already exceeded the usual scale of an Emperor's crew. Kuma and Yamato had at least the strength of the 3 calamities. With time and training, Haki Mastery, Berry Awakening, they could reach Emperor-level power. Zoro, Sanji, and Ace would also mature into top-tier fighters. Even Bonnie had unique combat qualities. Kane was thinking whether it might be wise, for a time, to avoid triggering the world government's deepest fears. Hancock clutched her chest, as if struck by Cupid's arrow. I am needed by Lord Kane," she cried, her eyes shining with overwhelming joy. Clearly, she'd only heard the words she wanted to hear. Since that's the case, she inhaled deeply, then steadied herself in a solemn vow. "I will continue to serve as a Shichibukai for Lord Kane." In her heart, she had already become Kane's secret agent inside the Marines. A sacrifice for love, a mission to support him from within. The resolve lit her up from within, and she glowed with a strange, radiant purpose. Chapter 92. Robin. Kane had always felt Hancock misunderstood him. In the end, though, the result wasn't all that different. He scratched his head and decided not to dwell on it. "Remember," he added, "if any Marine gives you unreasonable orders or asks you to do something that makes you feel wronged, don't force yourself. We can always leave. I'm your backing." "Lord Kane, you're too good to your concubine," Hancock exclaimed, throwing herself into his arms again. She breathed deeply, her cheeks flushed, and her eyes fluttered. "Is that Lord Kane's scent? It smells so good." "Please stop the theatrics, Hancock," Kane thought, his eye twitching as he barely suppressed a complaint. But there was no more time for that now. They were approaching Twin Capes, the gateway to the Grand Line, the only passage besides the 4 turbulent waterways around Reverse Mountain. The Raikugo's trip through here had been the result of one overly energetic white-haired girl's insistence. "Flying the whole time is boring," Yamato had grumbled, and she had a point. As the Raikugo eased toward the Twin Capes lighthouse, a long, mournful wail cry rose from deep under the sea. The water beneath them suddenly boiled and churned. A massive, oppressive black shadow ballooned up from the seabed and slowly rose, filling the ocean with its presence. "Wow, what's that?" Yamato and Bonnie leaned over the rail, eyes wide. The ship lurched as something grabbed it and lifted it with an irresistible force. Oh, what a huge whale!" the two cried. The creature was beyond imagination, over 100 meters wide, 400 meters long, a floating island. Its forehead was a map of scars, ancient and fresh. It tilted its head, and with a sound like mountains collapsing and a tsunami rolling in, its great body twisted. Splash! The Raikugo, like a leaf in a gale, was flung aside by the surge. Troublesome," Kane muttered, frowning. He vanished from where he stood, and midair transformed into a colossal emerald dragon. 2 dragon claws snatched the falling ship's sides and stopped its descent dead, suspending it above the roiling sea. The whale paid them no mind. It opened its cavernous mouth and sucked greedily, swallowing seawater and everything afloat. A huge whirlpool formed. Debris and ships were pulled straight toward that all-consuming maw. A black-haired woman on a sea turtle found herself swept downstream and into danger. Ah! Nico Robin cried as the current yanked the turtle from under her. No matter how she fought the turtle's flailing limbs, the suction dragged them both toward the whale's throat. Robin's face had gone pale. She forced herself to stay calm, rummaged for a life jacket, buckled it on, and clung desperately to the turtle's shell. She had planned contingencies for crossing to the Grand Line. The island whale at Twin Capes was the first real test. Once swallowed, few vessels escaped intact. Still, in that moment, she clung to any sliver of hope. "Do you need help, miss?" a calm, abrupt voice said at her ear. Robin snapped her head up, her pupils constricted. A great dragon circled above and looked down at her. Heavenly disaster, Kane! How? She hadn't seen the Raikugo earlier because the whale blocked her view. Robin bit her lip. On one side, the whale's mouth. On the other, capture by the Emperor pirates. Both choices bristled with unknown dangers. She hesitated, then forced a smile. "Thank you, but no, it's fine." To be swallowed offered some slim chance of surviving. To be taken by the Emperor pirates would mean losing any control over her fate. She preferred the uncertainty of the whale. The moment she answered, two dragon claws shot out. One scooped up her in a firm, precise grip. The other pinched the struggling sea turtle. Kane carried them both up and away from the whirlpool in a single elegant motion. "Remember," Kane said with a playful chuckle as he hovered, "one rule of the sea. When you're weak, you often don't get to choose." Robin's smile froze. So the legendary heavenly disaster had a twisted sense of humor. He had to make even a rescue into a provocation. He set the turtle gently back on the water near the lighthouse and placed Robin down beside it. Then he shifted back to human form and stood beside her. "Wow, a sea turtle ship?" Yamato bounded off the Raikugo and hopped around Robin's trembling vessel, inspecting it like she'd discovered a new continent. "I've never seen a ship like this before. How interesting." "Humph. I wonder what made Kane so eager to rush down and save someone," Violet said, folding her arms and staring Nico Robin up and down. When she clearly took in Robin's tall, defined features, fair skin, and the quiet intelligence about her that hardship hadn't erased, she drew a different conclusion. "Hey, newcomer, what country are you a princess of?" "Kane seems to have a thing for noble girls," Violet said, curiosity laced with teasing. Robin instinctively glanced at Kane. She had never imagined that the name Heavenly Disaster Kane, one that made pirates and navies shudder, came with such odd tastes. But after surviving the underworld for years, she'd learned the worst perversities humanity could harbor. Compared to those, Kane's little eccentricity seemed almost tame. Dong! A crisp flick snapped against Violet's forehead. "How many times have I told you? Not to spread rumors. It was just a coincidence." Kane scolded, exasperated. Below them, the island whale finished its monstrous meal, gave a satisfied thrumming rumble, and slowly sank back toward the seabed to resume its ancient routine. Chapter 93. Secretary Robin comes online. Ho ho ho, I never would have thought. The famous heavenly disaster Kane actually doing a good deed, saving people. A slow, slightly creaky voice came from the lighthouse doorway. An old man stepped out, his hair puffed into an exaggerated saffron shape and small round glasses perched on his nose. He wore a flashy pink shirt, casual light blue shorts, and sandals. With a giant syringe slung over one shoulder, he looked more like a retired beachgoer than anything else. Didn't the Roger Pirates, the world government's so-called embodiment of evil, do the same thing? Kane regarded him with interest. "You're Crocus, the doctor of the Roger Pirates, aren't you?" For a moment, everyone froze, then erupted. "The Roger Pirates? The Pirate King's doctor was here?" Crocus pushed his glasses up and let his gaze linger on Kane for a beat, a small smile in the corners of his eyes. "I never thought young folks today would remember an old fossil like me," he said. "After all these years, I thought only 2 of you would know who I am." Shanks and Buggy, of course. Kane understood. Before Crocus finished his sentence, the sea, which had calmed a moment before, suddenly swelled and surged again. The ground beneath them trembled. Crocus's smile vanished. His leisurely air snapped away. "I'm not here to chat," he said, and then moved. Despite his age, Crocus shot toward the shore with an arrow-like speed, diving into the waves with a nimbleness that left only a blur behind him. Violet watched the spray and murmured, "Now I'm convinced he was on the Pirate King's ship." At that speed, in that body, he hadn't been an ordinary man in his prime. Yamato's eyes lit up, fists clenching. I want to fight him. A Roger Pirates member has to be insanely strong. Kane rubbed his forehead. Yamato, don't bully old people. Mr. Bai, Crocus is a doctor, not a fighter. Robin's voice, small and weak, cut through the mild chaos. She drew a deep breath, steeling herself, then looked at Kane and hurriedly spoke. Lord Kane, I'm not a princess. I'm just an orphan who's helpless. Nothing you'd be interested in. You saved my life. I will always be grateful. May I go now? Kane's expression darkened as he glanced back at Violet, as if silently accusing her of ruining his reputation. Then he turned to Robin. Under her hopeful, pleading look, he shook his head. Nico Robin, he said calmly and clearly. The sole survivor of Ohara, the ruins of archaeological lore, the demon child with a bounty of 79 million berries. At each name, Robin paled. Her knees trembled. The last fragile hope she'd been clinging to snapped. For years she'd learned the hard truth. Anyone who offered help wanted only one thing, the knowledge she carried. Knowing Kane's motive wouldn't change anything. As Kane had said many times before, the weak don't get to choose. It's me, Robin said in a small, defeated voice, lowering her eyes. Resistance would be pointless before this man. Kane nodded. Then join me. I need your skills. Robin's heart sank. She had expected this. Every rescuer she'd met since Ohara had concealed the same purpose, to use her to read the poneglyphs and claim the One Piece. She had argued, tricked, and fled before, but each time she'd been dragged back. This time, exhausted, she gave in. I will decode the poneglyphs for you, she said, the words hollow from repetition. Kane surprised her by lifting a single finger and shaking it lightly. No, that's not why I want you. Robin blinked. You don't need me to read the poneglyphs? Kane smiled with unshakable confidence. For that, I have someone more qualified. Robin's brows knitted in confusion as Kane's gaze flicked to Kazuki Hiyori, who stood with a long sword at her hip. Hiyori, he said, show our new guest the special language you learned from your grandfather, Sukiyaki. Kane had already known that the poneglyphs were carved by the Kozuki clan's ancestors and that the family passed down the knowledge to interpret them. He had arranged for Hiyori to learn from Sukiyaki. Hiyori looked uncertain, but obedient. She cleared her throat and began to speak. What came out was a string of ancient rhythmic syllables, an old tongue that sounded foreign and musical at once. Robin's pupils tightened as the cadence hit her like a shockwave. She couldn't catch every word, but the fragments, the grammar, the syllabic structure were unmistakable, that lost language from 800 years ago. Even Dr. Clover at the Ohara Library had never pronounced it so fluently. The Ohara scholars had pieced together meanings from fragments, but they'd never fully restored the pronunciation. Hearing Hiyori speak made why Kane had been so confident click into place for Robin. If you don't need my knowledge, why me? She asked, voice trembling between relief and suspicion. Decoding the poneglyphs had been her greatest leverage. If Kane didn't want that, what did he want? Kane shrugged as if discussing the weather. I need a competent secretary, and coincidentally, you fit my aesthetic. Robin stared. That's it? If that doesn't satisfy you, Kane added with a small, almost teasing grin, think of it this way. I don't want those other ambitious types getting to you. The words should have felt like mercy, but Robin's instincts rebelled. Why spare a living witness when killing would be simpler and safer? Why go through the trouble of taking her in just to employ her as an assistant? Still, as she looked at Kane's inscrutable face, she found herself smiling, not from trust, but from calculation. Then I will serve you, she said. What choice did she have? Joining a powerful crew was better than being hunted or left alone. Here, at least, the emperors, the pirates strong enough to challenge the world government and Marineford, offered a kind of refuge. Perhaps this accidental capture was a turning point fate had handed her. Chapter 94, Brook and Laboon. Its name is Laboon. After administering a sedative to calm the huge, emotional island whale, Crocus gently stroked Laboon's scarred head and explained, after the Rumbar pirates went missing, Laboon has been ramming the Red Line day after day, trying to smash a tunnel through it to find any trace of them in the New World. So pitiful. Violet, Kazuki Hiyori, and Bonnie were instantly moved by the loyalty and waiting that had stretched across half a century. Even Ace and Zoro, usually thick-headed, fell quiet, looking away with a twinge of sorrow. Sanji inhaled deeply on his cigarette. let the smoke swirl in his lungs, then exhaled slowly, as if to let his grief out with it. "I'll help!" Yamato rolled up her sleeves, ran to the shore, and shouted at Laboon's enormous eye, "I'll teach you armament hockey! If you learn it, you won't get hurt when you ram the red line. You'll be able to ram faster, too." That was so like her. Instead of thinking about taking Laboon around Reverse Mountain, she wanted him to smash his way through it. Kane's expression hardened. The sadness that had just surfaced disappeared. "Aang." Unexpectedly, Laboon seemed to understand. He slapped the water with his huge tail, spraying waves everywhere, nodded his great head over and over, and let out an eager cry. Yamato's excitement exploded. She began wildly demonstrating her hockey technique to him. Kane blinked in surprise. One dares to offer it, and the other dares to learn it. Well, this young lady is certainly something. Crocus, who had weathered many storms, couldn't help but twitch. In Yamato, he saw a shadow of Roger, both reckless in their own ways. Kane cleared his throat. "Actually, I wanted to say the Rumbar pirates weren't completely wiped out." "Huh?" Crocus turned sharply. The last he'd heard was that the Rumbar pirates had entered the Calm Belt and were never heard from again. When he had told Laboon that the Rumbar pirates had no news, it had been meant to comfort the whale. Crocus had long assumed they'd perished in that sea of death. "It's true?" Kane nodded and revealed a truth long buried. Not long after the Rumbar pirates entered the Grand Line, Captain Yorkie and many crew members caught a deadly disease. To avoid endangering the rest, Yorkie entrusted the crew to Brook and took the infected to the Calm Belt, leaving them to fend for themselves. At the mention of Brook, Crocus immediately believed most of it. If anyone in this era still remembered that name, they must have known the pirates well. "Where did Brook and the others go?" Crocus pressed. Kane didn't hide it. "The Florian Triangle." Crocus inhaled sharply. The Florian Triangle was shrouded in fog year-round. Once a ship entered, it was easy to lose its way, and hundreds of vessels vanished there every year. No wonder Brook had disappeared. And now? "Almost completely wiped out," Kane said, "but Brook is alive." "He's alive?" Crocus repeated. Kane shrugged and chuckled. "He's doing all right, I think. He ate the Yomi Yomi fruit, and because of strange circumstances, he exists now as a skeleton. If I'm not mistaken," Kane went on, "he may have achieved what many can't, a kind of immortality." By chance, Brook had been resurrected only once. He waited until his body had decayed to a skeleton before reviving. As long as that skeleton remains intact, he cannot truly die. There's even a bit of pirate world common sense. Milk can replenish calcium and mend bones. It's like a small loophole for him. So that's how it is. Crocus smiled wryly. "I'm not sure if this is a blessing or a curse. Eternal life can be its own punishment." But whatever else, this was wonderful news for Laboon, who had waited for decades. Crocus almost cried with relief. He hurried to the shore and shouted, "Laboon, Laboon, did you hear that? Brook isn't dead. You still have a chance to be reunited." Laboon's eyes widened. He stared at Crocus as if checking for a joke. A few seconds later, certain the old man wasn't lying, he let out a tremendous cry, decades of longing, grievance, despair, and now overwhelming joy breaking like thunder. He flipped and thrashed, sending towering waves that drenched Crocus head to toe. "Mrow!" Urgent, jubilant calls poured from the whale as he slapped the water and dove for the distance, heading toward the Florian Triangle. Crocus wiped seawater from his face and shouted through tears and laughter, "Wait, Laboon, don't rush. Do you know where the Florian Triangle is?" "Wait for me, I'll go with you." Laboon surfaced and whined, pitiful and eager like a puppy, his huge eyes pleading. Crocus patted his head. "Don't worry, old friend. I'll find a way to get you there. We'll go together and find Brook." "Wait," Kane interjected hastily. "One more thing. Brook's shadow was stolen by Mariah. If you can't defeat him and get the shadow back, Brook can't survive in sunlight. Even if you find him, you can't bring him out." That was a serious problem. Crocus stroked his beard, troubled. His old bones might handle small-time pirates, but taking on a warlord of the sea, he might as well go to bed. Had it been 10 or 20 years earlier, there could have been a chance. "Need help?" Yamato stepped forward, puffing her chest out. "I'm great at fighting." "Thank you, young lady," Crocus said, shaking his head gently. "It wouldn't be proper to ask these newly met people to pick a fight with a Shichibukai over his personal matter. Don't worry, I may be useless now, but during all those years drifting at sea, I met many old friends. With their help, getting to Brook won't be a problem. Chapter 95, Ace and Crocus. Crocus turned and hurried back into the small lighthouse. A moment later, he reappeared carrying a bundle of shredded white paper. The strips trembled slightly in his hands. Life cards? Robin realized aloud. So the old man had been a crewmate of the Pirate King. They were old, not dead. When the life cards came into view, Ace, who had been silent until then, suddenly stepped forward. If you're all alive, why didn't you save him back then? His voice was low and strained, as if holding something back. He had assumed that when Roger was taken by the Marines, his crew must have been slaughtered or crippled. Now it seemed things hadn't been as simple. You could have stopped all of this. Ace's voice wavered with an indescribable pain. If he hadn't been captured, he wouldn't have said those words, and this era wouldn't have turned into this mess. Crocus stared at Ace in surprise. The boy's features, so like Roger's, made something clench in the old man's chest. You! He shook his head in disbelief. No, impossible. It can't be. He remembered the Marines' brutal, year-long hunt for Roger's bloodline. There logically should have been no survivors. Kane stepped forward. It's exactly as you think. Ace is Roger's son. His tone carried respect. Back then, Ace's mother managed to delay giving birth for 20 months. That's how she got him out from right under the Marines' noses. Crocus sighed, a tangled expression on his face. I see, you had a brave mother. Answer my question, Ace growled. Why didn't you save him? Did you all betray him? Not betrayal, child. Crocus's eyes drifted away, lost in distant memory. Your father, our captain, surrendered himself. What? Everyone else cried out in shock. For years, the Marines had told the story. Hero Garp personally arrested Pirate King Roger. Since you are Roger's son, I'll tell you properly, Crocus said. He told them what had happened 21 years ago. Roger had been struck by an incurable disease. That year, he invited Crocus to join the crew. Crocus had used every medical skill he had, but could only extend Roger's life by 5 years. Knowing his time was short, he chose to use his life to secure a peaceful life for us, his crew. Crocus's voice was flat with memory. He made a deal with the Marines, his surrender in exchange for our retirement. As long as we never became active again, the Marines agreed not to pursue us. But I never expected him, at the very last moment of his execution, to say the things he did and usher in the great pirate era. Crocus's gaze returned to Ace. We didn't know you existed. Later we heard the Marines ran an unprecedented long hunt for pregnant women on the island Roger had hidden on for a year. I always thought that if Roger had an heir, there'd be no way they'd escape the Marines' net. I never imagined. One had to admit, Roger's judgment of people had been extraordinary. Who would have thought a pirate would entrust his child to the very Marines who had hunted him, and that one of them would protect the child? Then why did he say those words? Ace demanded, impatient. Crocus hesitated, searching, then shook his head. I can guess a little, but I can't speak of it. It's tied to the existence of One Piece. Furious, Ace lunged and grabbed Crocus by the collar, ready to force answers. A large hand clamped his wrist. Ace spun his head, eyes flashing. Big brother Kane? He said. Don't make things hard for him. This was Roger's choice. Kane met Ace's eyes. Don't forget why you joined. Dwelling on an unchangeable past won't change anything. Ace met Kane's look for a moment, then let his arm fall. You have a good captain. Crocus's sigh turned softer, almost admiring. Child, you clearly have unresolved things about Roger. If you want, listen to how an old man remembers your father. Kane found it a family matter and stepped back. He watched in silence as Crocus and Ace walked into the lighthouse. Robin had quietly come up beside Kane without anyone noticing. She tapped her chin with a slender finger, a teasing smile on her lips. How bold of you, Lord Kane. No wonder you can take in a devil child like me. Compared to the Pirate King's son, my burden seems rather light. You're mistaken, Kane replied with a chuckle. If Ace hadn't made a name for himself, to the world government, he'd just be an insignificant name. You, however, are someone who can dig at the government's roots. In that case, I must cling tightly to a big tree like you, Lord Kane, Robin purred, batting her eyes in mock surprise. Put away the theatrics. I'm not one of those fools from West Blue you've toyed with. I can tell acting from truth, she added, softer but still playful. Kane was unmoved. From now on, you will begin work, Miss Secretary. He immediately outlined a detailed series of directives. To Robin's surprise, Kane entrusted her with far more authority than she expected. He involved her directly in the Beast Pirates' core weapons and the Seastone trade network. Besides the tasks I've given you, there's one more important thing, he said. What is it? Training. Training? Robin echoed, puzzled. Kane's expression was sincere. As my secretary, you can't be helpless. At the very least, you must learn armament hockey and observation hockey. I don't want to get word one day that my secretary was easily captured. It's a real nuisance to have to rescue you. Rescue me? The unfamiliar idea sent a small, complicated ripple through Robin's chest. She was quiet for a beat, then nodded. I understand. An hour later, Crocus reappeared with Ace. The boy's anger had faded, replaced by a kind of vacancy as he tried to absorb everything he'd learned. He would need time to sort it all out. Kane turned to Crocus. Old man, do you know how many ways there are to use Haoshoku? Haoshoku? Then you've got the wrong person. Crocus shook his head. At best, I'm a doctor with a little strength. Fighting was what Roger and the others did. Kane shrugged. He had been hoping at least to learn some of Jabba's special Haoshoku techniques. Chapter 96, Clash with the Queen Mother's Anthem. Goodbye, Laboon. Yamato stood at the bow, waving her arm wildly as her voice cut through the sea breeze. Remember the techniques I taught you. The others crowded along the rail and waved back at the giant whale. Ooh! Laboon sounded a joyful cry in response. Then, Crocus, safely hidden inside his belly, swam off into the deep. He would finally bring an end to decades of waiting. The Rayquaza resumed its voyage. Days later, in a stretch of the New World, the Rayquaza approached a steel behemoth that sprawled across the sea like a floating island. Grand Tesoro, Guild Tesoro's masterpiece, rose up, the largest entertainment city in the world, a sleepless metropolis of gold and indulgence. Two enormous island turtles towed the colossal structure. A gargantuan, neon-lit entrance at the bow swallowed ships full of guests from across the globe. Just as the Rayquaza was about to pass through that glittering gateway, Violet barreled over to the railing, agitated, and pointed toward the stern. This is bad, Kane. The Queen Mama Chanter is heading straight for us. Kane hurried to the stern. In the distance, the Queen Mama Chanter, a towering cake ship, was charging toward them with tremendous momentum. He frowned. Who's commanding? Perospero, Daifuku, Oven, Opera. Violet recited the names at once, eyes narrowed. As the Rayquaza's chief lookout, she had memorized the important faces from wanted posters and scoured them daily. She wanted no mistakes. Kane understood immediately. With none of the three sweet commanders aboard, this wasn't a full-scale assault. They were acting on Charlotte Linlin's orders to check out Tesoro and report the Big Mom Pirate's stance toward Guild Tesoro. Kine-sama, should we give way? Speed asked, watching the cake ship close the distance with concern. Who do you think I am? Kane snapped. He glared at Speed and barked. Ram them! If they wanted collision, they'd give it back. He wasn't about to back down. Even if Charlotte Linlin herself were on board, he wouldn't flee. This wasn't mere pride. It was politics. Yes, sir. Speed had never seen Kane so volatile. He flinched, then snapped to attention and barked orders for emergency maneuvers. The Rayquaza carved a wide arc across the sea, swung its bow, and charged at the Queen Mama Chanter at full speed. On the Queen Mama Chanter, Perospero's face darkened as he watched the Rayquaza close. He'd meant to rile the other ship a little, give Oven some vengeance and show the Charlotte family's might, but the Rayquaza's aggressive, almost fanatical posture left him uneasy. Their mission was reconnaissance, not a war with the Beast Pirates. Behind him, his younger siblings who loved to stir trouble were already excitedly cheering. Are they coming right for us? No running away, actually approaching? They cried. How utterly clueless, the Charlotte children laughed. Charlotte Amande, pale-faced with light blue hair and a slender rapier at her hip, flashed dangerous eyes and shrieked. Ram them, Brother Perospero, avenge Brother Oven. Daifuku rubbed his hands and echoed, Amande's right. Oven didn't speak, but his body trembled and his eyes burned with rage. That fight 3 years earlier had nearly destroyed him. If not for being rescued, he might have been dead. Spurred by his siblings' shouts, Perospero abandoned restraint. He raised his candy cane command staff and pointed it at the Rayquaza. Then let's go say hello to those barbarians. A thunder of cheers erupted as the Queen Mama chanter surged faster. Within minutes, the two Leviathans were almost upon each other. On both decks, people watched the approaching enemy, expressions raw with anticipation. At the same instant, Kane and Perospero slammed their feet into the decks, and black hockey rolled over the bows like a tide. Bam! The dragon figurehead of the Rayquaza collided with the gingerbread face of the Queen Mama chanter with a bone-jarring impact. The shock spread outward, slamming the sea into monster waves. Both ships shuddered violently. People stumbled, and some collapsed to their knees. Ouch! That hurts! The gingerbread figurehead wailed in a comic, distorted voice, but there was no time for the crew to pity it. They stared at the Rayquaza in alarm. Cannons on the Rayquaza were raised and trained on them, crew ready to fire. Kane stood at the bow, entirely unshaken by the collision, and called out coldly, "Charlotte Perospero, are you trying to start a war?" "Bastard! I should be asking you that." Perospero roared. "You crashed into me." He was sure of it. He'd been following the other ship and hadn't expected an attack. Kane only sneered openly, voice iced. "Are you trying to reason with a pirate?" Before Perospero could bite back further, two dark figures dropped onto the Queen Mama chanter's deck. Opera, the cream minister, sticky and corpulent, gasped when he saw who had just landed. He was timid by nature and suddenly felt an awful premonition. "Heavenly disaster, Kane! Ogre Princess Yamato! Hula!" Opera blurted, his voice trembling. Kane swept a contemptuous glance over the Charlotte family members. "Just a few nobodies like you dare to challenge me? Yamato, give them a lesson," Kane ordered. "Alrighty," Yamato grinned, baring sharp fangs. In the next instant, a terrifying aura exploded from her, sweeping across the Queen Mama chanter's deck like a tsunami. Thud, thud, thud. Invisible heavy hammers slammed into those Charlotte family members who lacked true strength. Scores of them crumpled to the deck, eyes rolling back, knocked out without a sound like stalks of wheat cut down. A deck that had been bustling moments before lay strewn with unconscious bodies. Only Perospero, Daifuku, Oven, Opera, Amande, and a handful of the ship's stronger ministers remained on their feet, barely. Pale and sweating, they stood trembling as Yamato's aura still hummed in the air, the threat of further violence clear as day. Chapter 97. Oven's Defeat. Damn it, is the gap really this wide? Perospero tightened his grip on his candy cane, shock spreading through him. You couldn't shortcut Haoshoku, Conqueror's Haki. It only grew with the user's strength. An ogre princess like Yamato had already made things difficult for them, and Heavenly Disaster Kane stood right beside her. A roar tore across the deck. "Go to hell, bastard!" 3 years of humiliation and hatred exploded out of Oven. His eyes were bloodshot, veins throbbing at his temples, his arms heated red like branding irons, radiating a heat that warped the air. "Taste the fruit of my 3 years of training," he bellowed. Extreme heat wave punch. Oven leaped forward, his fists wreathed in superheated air that could melt steel, slammed toward Kane. Yet Kane didn't even blink. He stood in place. "If you want to get to Kane, you'll have to get past me first," Yamato snapped, stepping in front of him. She swung her spiked club in a blur. A concentrated blast of freezing air like a glacier cut outward. When the club met Oven's fist, cold and heat collided in a thunderous crash. Steam hissed up in a towering plume and blanketed the deck. In the mist, Oven was thrown backward, his feet gouging deep furrows in the wood. He skidded back more than 10 paces before he could steady himself, panting. The crimson glow on his arms had dimmed. He'd taken a heavy hit in that clash. Before he could recover, a clear, cold shout rang out. "Ice Slash!" A white wolfman tore through the steam and leapt high above Oven's head. Yamato slammed her spiked club down with all her force, channeling freezing air into the strike aimed at Oven's skull. Perospero's pupils narrowed. He swung his candy cane. Candy Wall! A stream of purplish-red syrup flowed up and formed a hemisphere above Oven's head. When the spiked club struck the candy dome, the freezing air ran through it and the surface crystallized. For a breath, the candy wall held, encased in a layer of solid ice, and Perospero dared to hope. Then came a series of crisp cracks. Centered where the club had landed, spiderweb cracks raced across the brittle frozen candy. They spread in an instant until the entire dome was webbed with fractures. With a thunderous crash, Perospero's proud candy wall, supposedly able to withstand artillery, exploded into a rain of sugary shards. The club smashed through and continued its descent straight toward Oven. Scorching bone heat hellstorm! Oven howled and pushed his heat berry to its limit. He thrust his palms forward, and a blazing wave of heat erupted like a solar flare, engulfing Yamato. The air itself ignited, and the deck of the Queen Mama Chanter, made of atom wood, spontaneously burst into flame, turning into a roaring sea of fire. The heat was so intense, even Prospero and those standing farther back felt their skins sting. "Turn to charcoal in my all-consuming heat wave." Oven laughed, madness in his voice. "I was saving this for that bastard Kane, but if you're looking for death, you'll do." The laughter cut off as a figure blazed out of the inferno bathed in icy light. Yamato stood unscathed, sheathed in a clear, glittering layer of ice. The shell shattered like glass under Oven's stare, and she remained unharmed. "Humph, is that all you've got?" Yamato said, disappointed, but already moving. In a blink, she vanished from where she'd been, then reappeared behind Oven. The spiked club came down like a white meteor. With a dull thud, Oven was sent flying like a broken doll, utterly defenseless, over the ship's railing and tumbling toward the sea. "Oven!" Daifuku yelled, rubbing his belly. A giant lamp demon made of dense smoke materialized in a heartbeat and lunged after him. The demon's palm caught Oven just before he struck the water. Prospero and the others breathed as one. Relief. If Oven had fallen into the sea, they would have been helpless. Berry users couldn't rescue him in the water. "That damned ogre princess!" Amande's eyes flashed cold. Her fingers slid to the hilt at her waist, murderous intent aimed at Yamato. Kane's gaze swept over her like a cold wind and landed on Prospero. "Do you really want to continue? Out of respect for the friendship between your captain and ours, I can forgive your brother's rashness just now." His tone went colder. "But my patience has limits." Prospero's face twitched. No one had spoken to him like that since Mama became Pirate Emperor, surely not someone as insolent as Kane. He ground out, "Sorry," pressing Amande's hand down as she started to draw her sword. "Oven was impulsive," he said, forcing the words through clenched teeth. "Let's go," Kane added, flicking his hand toward Yamato. The two of them hopped back onto the Rayquaza. The serpent-shaped ship lifted its bow and sailed back toward the massive entrance of Gran Tesoro. The deck fell into an uneasy silence. "Brother Prospero, are we just gonna let them leave?" Amande pursed her lips, humiliation written on her pale face. "Calm down, Amande." Prospero's voice was grim. "I don't like it either, but we're no match for that bastard Kane." She flickered between anger and acceptance. Prospero's assessment was unavoidable. Apart from the three sweet commanders, few in the Charlotte family could have handled Yamato so cleanly, and Kane was there as well. "Should we call Brother Katakuri?" Daifuku grumbled. Prospero shot him a look. "Aren't you already embarrassed enough?" If he, the eldest son of the Charlotte family and heir to the Big Mom pirates, had to beg Katakuri for help over something like this, what face would he have left to inherit the family and rule the country? Chapter 98, Teaching Morgans a Lesson. War Warning. The Rayquaza eased into the cavernous inner harbor of Gran Tesoro. Perhaps today's guest was important enough that Tesoro chose not to greet them with his usual gold dust rain, the subtle, body-controlling flourish he favored. "Wow, it's beautiful." Bonnie leaned over the rail, eyes wide, mesmerized by the opulence glittering before her. "Is all that gold?" Even Violet, a former princess who'd seen plenty of wonders, covered her mouth in surprised delight. Everywhere they looked, streets, buildings, ornaments, the city gleamed in golden light, an excess of luxury that made it seem almost unreal. "Most of it's just gilded showmanship," Kane chuckled, killing the fantasy. Then he pointed to the tallest, most ostentatious structure at the city's center. "That one's different. According to Doffy, it's the only 8-star hotel in the world, the Golden King, and it's actually built of solid gold." Tesoro was said to control something like 20% of the world's berries. He was rich enough to rival a nation, but not reckless enough to pave an entire city in pure gold, except, apparently, for that hotel. As they spoke, the Rayquaza docked and the gangway descended. Well-dressed attendants rushed forward. Leading them was a man with slicked-back gray-green hair, oversized purple shades, a flamboyant pink suit, and fingers almost buried in gold rings. Gleaming chains and bracelets flashed on his neck and wrists like walking treasure. It was Guild Tesoro himself. "Welcome, Mr. Kane, and all members of the Beast's Pirates," Tesoro said, arms wide and smiling broadly. Kane's eyes flicked to Tesoro's left hand. His ring finger was bare. For all his gold obsession, Tesoro was evidently sentimental where love was concerned. "I hope today's show won't disappoint," Kane replied. "Rest assured, I will let you experience the finest entertainment the world has to offer," Tesoro declared, flashing those many rings, and then gave a soft command. "Baccarat." "Yes, Tesoro-sama." A statuesque woman with a winning figure and long rose-red hair stepped forward in a striking black and white dress that left much skin bare. Baccarat bowed and smiled. "As a welcoming gift, we've deposited 100 million berries into each of your private entertainment accounts for you to spend freely. Mr. Kane, your account already contains 300 million. Kane's jaw tightened as he calculated. This was no small sum. 1.2 billion berries could buy the heads of an entire New World crew in an earlier age. And this was only the appetizer Tesoro was offering. He guessed the total berries Tesoro planned to throw around today would reach into the billions, maybe tens of billions. Of course, Tesoro wouldn't exactly be losing money. The funds could only be spent inside his territory, and they'd likely evaporate through house advantage and high-stakes play. The true aim was to hook high rollers and keep them spending. "A small token of my appreciation. Enjoy yourselves," Tesoro laughed, then excused himself. "I have matters to attend to. Baccarat will represent me and ensure all your needs are met." He disappeared amid white-clad bodyguards. Under Baccarat's personal supervision, Kane and his group checked into the Golden King's top-floor luxury suite. "All right, everyone, do as you like. Play, buy, whatever," Kane told them, but his tone grew firm. "Don't get addicted to gambling." "Understood." The crew nodded, and Kane slipped away. He hadn't come for pure pleasure. In the glittering first-floor lobby, a familiar voice purred. "Kane-sama, long time no see." Stussy swept toward him in a sleek black dress, smile perfect as ever. "You're as radiant as always." "Stussy," Kane said, and reached out to lift her chin with an easy, possessive gesture. "Has Morgan shown up yet?" he asked. Stussy feigned offense, tracing idle circles against his chest. "The first thing you ask about when you come to see me is that Birdman? Am I less appealing than him?" "You'll get your turn tonight," she teased, and Kane rewarded her with a playful squeeze. Then Stussy grew businesslike, the underworld queen reasserting herself. "As for Morgan's, he's in Arcade City. Said he's doing field research at the racetrack." "Perfect. Let's go meet the News King," Kane said, showing his grin. "I'm looking forward to a pleasant chat." Arcade City's racetrack was hosting a brutal turtle shell race. 6 teams drove armed, modified racers around a city circuit. The first car to finish won, but along the way anything went. Attacks were allowed without limit. It was like a real-life, deadly Mario Kart. On the VIP stand, one figure stood out in a top hat, light blue shirt, yellow bow tie, red and white checkered trousers, and a black cloak. The most distinctive feature was the long beak. Morgan's, one of the emperors of the underworld, president of the World Economic News, and a user of an albatross zoan fruit. Having crossed too many people, he usually kept his beastman form as protection. He sat snapping photos of the 6 cars, more bored than thrilled, taking down facts and footage as always. "Morgan's," Stussy called. Morgan's turned, but his eyes slid right past Stussy. When he spotted Kane, his whole expression changed. Pure, desperate eagerness. "Heavenly disaster, Kane! You came at the perfect time." He practically dove forward. "Give me 5 minutes. No, 3. Just a quick exclusive interview. Was your clash with the Charlotte family a prelude to war between the Beasts and the Big Mom Pirates?" Morgan's rattled off, excited. "The News King lives up to his name," Kane said, amusement flickering across his face. Morgan's puffed with pride. Outside of the world government, few matched his network. Stussy raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you running Tesoro's headline piece?" she asked. Tesoro had apparently bought the front page that day. Morgan's waved it off. "Those advertorials can be left to my reporters. If there's something on Kane, that's front-page material. Tesoro can buy his island's headlines, but he won't beat me for this." "An exclusive, huh? Maybe," Kane drawled, letting the smile spread. Morgan's face lit up like a lantern until Kane's tone shifted. "First," Kane said close and low, "I need to settle an old score with you." Morgans barely had time to register the word before Kane's hand clamped around his neck. The pressure was immediate and brutal. Morgan's eyes bulged. Kane leaned in and whispered coldly, "Your next answer will decide whether I twist your neck." The Birdman froze, looking like a plucked chick waiting for a butcher. "Brother Kane, don't kill me! Don't kill me! Stussy, say something!" he croaked, wings flapping uselessly. Stussy covered her mouth and laughed quietly, enjoying the spectacle. "I'm sorry, President Morgans. Kane's will isn't something I can influence. I helped you." Gasp! Morgan started, but the pressure tightened until he swallowed his words and pasted on a horrible, ingratiating smile. "Brother Kane, there's no grudge between us." In his memory, he'd never actually slandered the Emperor. He knew when to go loud and when to keep quiet. "You didn't slander me. You praised me too much," Kane said, leaning close and murmuring. "Do I need to remind you who the Pirate King's successor is?" Morgan's expression froze, his feathers prickled. I had no malintentions. I purely admire you." "Yes, I admire you." Cold sweat beaded on his brow. In a panic, he offered, "From now on, before any reports about you are published, I'll let you review them first. I promise you'll be satisfied." Kane scoffed. "I don't believe you. You don't fear the world government. Why would you fear me? Next time you'll hide, and I won't find you." Morgans was genuinely terrified. Around them, the crowd had discreetly given the pair space. Both were heavyweights whose disputes drew caution. Yet for all his fear, Morgans felt a curious kinship with Kane, an odd kind of understanding. "I swear by my reputation as a journalist, no exaggeration, no lies. I promise." Morgans forced the words out then, in a last-ditch bid, added, "If you don't believe me, kill me." Kane finally nodded. "All right." He loosened his grip a fraction but didn't release it. "You'll still owe me compensation." This was a first, a subject demanding compensation from a reporter. Morgan's eyes darted, and in a conspiratorial whisper, he offered something better. "How about a bombshell exclusive, something huge and directly related to you?" Kane released him. "What is it?" Morgans rubbed his sore neck and leaned in with a roguish grin. "The Red Hair Pirates are going to make trouble for you. Shanks plans to use you as a stepping stone." Kane's brows snapped together. He had long expected the Red Hair Pirates to seek the title of Emperor eventually. An upstart doesn't rise without challenging the old order. He'd assumed Shanks would pick a softer target. Big Mom's scattered holdings had looked vulnerable of late, and the Red Hair crew had no ill ties with Whitebeard's remnants. By that logic, Charlotte Linland's territory seemed the obvious choice. Hearing Morgan's claim changed things. Chapter 99, Cooperation with Tesoro. An affiliated force aligned with the Red Hair Pirates had been completely wiped out by Jack's crew over a clash of interests. That was Shank's reason for war. Simple enough, but on this vast ocean, it was enough. After exchanging Den Mushi numbers with Morgan's, Kane no longer wanted to fuss over the troublesome newsbird. He took out his own Den Mushi and called the beast's executive vice captain. "Hello?" King's voice was as cold as ever. Kane relayed Morgan's intelligence. There was a long silence on the other end, only faint breathing audible. Finally, King's composed voice came again. "They moved faster than I expected, but it's still within what we planned. When are you coming back?" Kane thought for a moment. "Leaving tomorrow. Earliest arrival in Wano in 5 days." "I understand." King hung up. Kane put away the Den Mushi with an unreadable expression. He hadn't been too worried, more concerned that a delay in passing on the intelligence might cost the beast's pirates dearly. It seemed Kaido's side had not been caught completely unprepared. No one was a fool. In large-scale operations, it's nearly impossible to conceal everything, unless Shanks intended a one-man Red Force surprise attack. "Lord Kane, what are your plans?" Stussy stepped forward at the right moment and asked softly. "Find Tesoro." Kane's lips curved into a meaningful smile. "I want to discuss a deal that could change the world." Grand Tesoro's reception room smelled of expensive cigars and champagne. Kane and Tesoro sat opposite each other on plush sofas. Tesoro swirled the golden liquid in his glass, a measured skepticism on his face. "A deal?" "As far as I know," Tesoro said, "the beast's pirates' weapons and seastone trade are handled by Joker, aren't they?" He leaned forward, interest flickering in his eyes. "Are you changing partners? If so, I'm very interested." Kane shook his head slowly. "No, We're not replacing Doflamingo. He's sensible. What I want to talk about is something else. From his pocket, Kane produced a seemingly ordinary sleepy Den Den Mushi and set it on the gilded coffee table between them. A Den Den Mushi? Tesoro glanced at it, his tone turning dismissive. If the beast's pirates need them, I could always offer the best shop locations for free. He thought about it. How much profit could a Den Den Mushi business make? The world's largest Den Den Mushi merchants pulled in at most a few billion berries a year. Not worth Tesoro's personal attention. Kane only chuckled. Are you sure? We can supply a steady number of Den Den Mushi. How many? 100? 200? Tesoro sipped his champagne, amused by what he assumed was Kane's inexperience. 500 every 6 months. Kane raised 5 fingers without hurry. And that's for ordinary communication models. Special models, imaging, eavesdropping, surveillance are extra. Tesoro choked on his wine. His companion paled and hurried him a handkerchief. You're serious? Of course. Kane leaned back, calm. The beast's pirates have mastered the core techniques for large-scale, stable breeding and cultivation of Den Den Mushi. He let the words sink in, then dropped an even more stunning claim. 500 is only the start. If we scale up, 1,000, 10,000, more will come. Tesoro's breath caught. Even if half of it were true, it would upend the world's communications. The wealth and influence implied were staggering. Without hesitation, Tesoro laughed and reached a decision. I'll take this business. Thank you, Mr. Kane. I only ask for a 10% cut. He already imagined the flood of guests to grant Tesoro once he had exclusive distribution, a new golden age. Kane nodded once, accepting. He was not going to increase Tesoro's share. He was confident he could force Tesoro into the venture even without profit. But there was no need to press that hard. They toasted. Kane tapped his glass. I have one request. Make Den Den Mushi ubiquitous across the sea. My goal is for every household, every person, to have one, Kane added. Tesoro's smile froze. Pardon me, Mr. Kane, but that's impossible. There are far too many poor people on the sea. Expecting them to pay hundreds of thousands or millions of berries for a Den Den Mushi is unrealistic. What if the price fell to 100,000 berries, or even 10,000? Kane suggested with a mysterious smile. That would be insane. Tesoro's face twisted with confusion. This was a monopolistic luxury business. Why give up huge profits for low-margin volume? No, Tesoro, you're blinded by money, Kane said, raising an index finger gently. Don't you think the world is too quiet, too isolated? He spread his hands, eyes burning with fanatic conviction. On this ocean, islands are cut off. 2 nearby islands might never speak. Imagine if everyone had Den Den Mushi, how tightly intertwined would information become? Think of the opportunities. A celebrity once famous only on one island could broadcast and be seen by hundreds of millions instantly. Her fame would skyrocket. Live broadcasts, global audiences. Think about the merchants, the entertainers, the possibilities for commerce and influence. Tesoro's expression changed as the idea took hold. Kane continued, voice low and intense. Even if we only charged a small service fee, the accumulated wealth would be enormous. And strategically, widespread Den Den Mushi means control of the world's most powerful mouthpiece, enough, at a critical moment, to strike a blow at the world government. Tesoro was silent for a beat, thinking. It's tempting. I admit it's not a pipe dream, but why me? Kane smiled and crossed his legs. 2 reasons. First, you're a rare business genius. I recognize that. This needs your talent. Second, he paused deliberately, glancing at Tesoro's attendants. Let these others leave. Everyone, go. Tesoro hesitated, but he had a feeling the next words would determine his path. The heavy golden doors closed behind the departing guests. The reception room belonged to Kane and Tesoro alone. Speak, Tesoro said, leaning forward. Kane leaned in as well, hands clasped under his chin, smiling with a dangerous calm. The second reason? We share a fundamental interest. Common interest? Making money? Tesoro's brow creased. No, taking down those celestial dragons who act like gods and look down on everyone. Kane's voice hardened. Tesoro stiffened, his wineglass tipped, spilling amber liquid over his suit. He stared at Kane in disbelief. That's not a joke, Mr. Kane. Tesoro tried to laugh it off. They're the descendants of the creators, the celestial dragons. We businessmen grovel for their favor. How could we dare? Is that so? Kane's eyes were full of contempt. Have you forgotten Stella's revenge? Tesoro snapped. He looked up so suddenly his fingers lost control and his wine glass shattered. What did you say? You know Stella? He stood, trembling with emotion. You know something about Stella? Kane answered coldly. I know a little. She was gentle and kind, and she died by the whim of a celestial dragon. You seem to have drowned that memory in wine and women. Tesoro's face twisted. You don't understand. You're an outsider. How could you know what Stella meant to me? How dare you question my feelings? You haven't forgotten for a single day, he snarled, voice collapsing into raw grief. I'll show you what I've built. At his command, the gold in the room leapt. Statues, decorations, even the floor's gilding surged toward Kane like a molten tide. But Kane was gone from where he'd been. In the next instant, he stood before Tesoro, eyes locked on him, utterly unfazed by the golden maelstrom behind him. You amassed this wealth in a few years. Impressive, Kane said, poking Tesoro's chest. And then what? Continue to trade and hoard gold? Collect riches to fight the celestial dragons? Ask yourself, do you actually dare? Tesoro's throat tightened. He opened his mouth to roar, to protest, but the words faltered. The bravado that had buoyed him collapsed like a punctured balloon. His arms fell, his face flushing with bewilderment and despair. What else can I do? He muttered, half to Kane and half to himself. The celestial dragons are powerful and protected by the Marines. What can my strength do? I can only keep making money, keep strengthening myself. Excuses, Kane cut him off. A life of luxury has corrupted you. Your fire for revenge is dying out. No, I haven't. Tesoro tried to bellow like a trapped beast to prove himself. If I keep making money, control the world's berries, no, half of them, then the celestial dragons will kneel. Kane snorted. Daydreaming. Money is merely an accessory to power. Don't you understand? On this sea, only absolute power rules. To Kane, Tesoro's grand plans were little more than consolations for broken ideals. He saw Tesoro's words as self-deception, the last weak defenses of a man whose hatred had been softened by gold and pleasure. Chapter 100. The Auction. The Mera Mera no Mi Tesoro stared at Kane like he'd seen a ghost. Absolute power was the only way to rule everything. If he had held any illusions 5 years ago when he first acquired the gold berry, he certainly didn't now. The closer he got to the center of power in this world, the heavier and more suffocating that pressure felt. Not only were the 3 Marine admirals and the fleet admiral at the top, but the world government had CP0, the celestial dragon's strongest shield, and the unfathomable God's Knights. What could one man do? Tesoro had fallen into a deep, hopeless despair. Then a hand appeared in front of him. He looked up. Kane's eyes met his, confident and open. Kane's lips curved. Join me. What? Tesoro froze, then laughed bitterly. So that was your plan? That's right. Kane's answer was remarkably straightforward. You can't topple the world government alone, and I can't do it alone. Why don't we unite? You bring the business mind. I bring the power to change the world. We need each other. The man had revealed his ambition plainly, almost brazenly. What confidence! Tesoro studied Kane's face, searching for deceit or calculation, but found only pure ambition and unwavering certainty. He stood there a long time in silence. Stella, is this the path you sent me? Before I completely fell, did you place a man like this in my way to save what's left of me? Relief broke through his despair, and a laugh escaped him, half release, half madness. I suppose I have no choice. He gripped Kane's hand firmly. Let's work together and drag those so-called gods off their pedestals. Let's trample them in the mud. Kane grinned. Auction? Back at his suite in the Golden King Hotel, Kane found Ace standing awkwardly in the doorway, clutching a glossy brochure. Big brother Kane, I want this fruit. Ace's earlobes flushed. He wasn't used to asking favors. The moment he'd seen the picture in the brochure, he'd wanted it badly. For the grand opening, Tesoro had spared no expense. Entertainment, guests, and an auction stocked with rare treasures to attract heavy hitters. Devil fruits were, of course, the main attractions. Among the 5 announced, the most eye-catching was a Logia-type devil fruit, the Mera Mera no Mi. Kane turned the brochure and raised an eyebrow at the flame-like spiral pattern. Ace, of all people, chasing this fruit. After coming to the New World, he still managed to find it. Kane didn't mind. The Mera Mera no Mi was a top-tier Logia with enormous potential and adaptability. If it weren't for how the Magu Magu no Mi naturally countered it, it would rank even higher. More importantly, a devil fruit's power depended on the user's compatibility. The more suited you were, the easier and more potent your growth. Don't worry, I'll help you bid. Kane smiled and patted Ace's shoulder. If the brochure hadn't announced the Mera Mera no Mi publicly, Kane might even have asked Tesoro to stage a quiet acquisition beforehand. Thank you, Big Brother Kane, Ace nodded gratefully. It's nothing, we're partners. Kane's smile was easy and sincere. Night fell across the Golden City, turning it into a haze of neon and reflected gilt, lights glittering like day but with the added allure of decadence. The auction hall pulsed with life. Before the proceedings began, guests waited in a banquet hall. Almost every important person in the room gathered. It had also turned into a social stage. Besides the Charlotte family, the people who mattered to Kane were the Shichibukai. He, a collector of Zoan-type fruits, was particularly drawn to an ancient Zoan Allosaurus fruit on the block. King of shipping Giberson, king of loan sharks Dufeld, king of warehousing Umit, king of funeral parlors Drug Peklo. Stussy shepherded a parade of underworld magnates to pay their respects. Kane gave a polite, reserved nod, his gaze drifting across them. His manner was cool and distant, and the would-be emperors of the underworld, used to fawning audiences, dared not show offense. They plastered on obsequious smiles and offered flattery. As a great billboard of the beast's pirates, Kane had earned the right to act above them. These kings were, in truth, hyenas who thrived in the gray market, backed by some force, but not worth Kane's effort beyond a nod. Morgans, who controlled the press, watched nearby like a hawk. When his eye caught sight of Nico Robin in the group, his beaked mouth opened and he froze. Then a greedy excitement spread across his face. Little brother Kane, Morgans leaned in and whispered, "You're bold. You took Nico Robin in without a disguise?" Robin stiffened and her face went pale. She hadn't expected to be recognized so openly. She regretted not insisting on a disguise. Kane just shrugged. It's fine. The world government won't care. He had that much confidence. The world government had a contradictory attitude about Robin. They loathed and feared the devil child with a massive bounty, yet they hadn't dispatched a dedicated CP unit after she'd been spotted with Luffy in Water 7. They seemed content to keep her on their wanted lists and bounties rather than commit to a full pursuit. Kane guessed they only suspected she could decipher poneglyphs. They preferred to treat her as a threat and issue a warrant. Morgans laughed. I'd love it if the world government cared more. It'd make for explosive headlines. Kane gave him an indulgent look. Try this, Kane. Yamato returned from the food area beaming, a plate in hand. She speared a perfect steak and offered it to Kane. He bit into it, crispy outside, tender inside, juices bursting with black pepper and herbs. He nodded approvingly. Very good. Yamato's face lit up. I knew you'd like it. Fufu, such affection is enviable. A strange, distinctive laugh cut in. Doflamingo swaggered over. Long time no see, Kane. It's been a while, Joker. They exchanged greetings like old acquaintances. It's to your taste, I hope? Doflamingo asked with a smirk. Kane admitted the place wasn't bad. His partners were enjoying themselves. As a partner of Tesoro, Doflamingo had his interests in this golden wonderland. When the bell rang to signal the auction's start, the hall's fan-shaped design and spotlighted stage came to life. Tiered seating fanned out behind the stage, and above, more than 20 lavish private boxes floated like islands reserved for the most distinguished guests. A team of hostesses in high-slit cheongsams led Kane's party to box number 1, the best of the boxes. The Charlotte family was shown into box number 2 next door. Big Brother Prospero, why did they get box number 1? Oven snarled as Kane's group retreated. The others glared in indignation. Prospero frowned, but swallowed his anger. Enough. Don't forget our mission. We'll get back at them later. He knew who had the bigger fist at the moment. There would be no point in humiliating themselves over a box when they had to secure the butterfruit for Big Mom. So Prospero forced everyone to focus on the main task. Inside box number 1, Kane took in the furnishings and nodded in approval. A massive one-way glass wall let them look down on the auction while preserving privacy. From up here, the crowd below looked like ants, the perfect psychological setup. Tesoro had thought of everything. Each VIP box had an image den mushi, that broadcast the stage in real time and let guests place bids without leaving their sofas. The auction began in earnest. The auctioneer in a sharp suit introduced item after item. To ordinary guests, the gems and artworks were treasures, but the VIPs in the top boxes barely reacted. A few famous blades finally got some bidding, but the crowd truly came alive when Devil Fruits took the stage. Tesoro kept the tempo up by mixing in some more common fruits among the other items. Paramecia type Extend fruit sold for 450 million berries. Zoan type Dog fruit, Dachshund form, sold for 510 million berries. Though the auction started at 100 million berries, that base price was for the least desirable fruits. Any decent devil fruit could send bidding through the roof. As the sale prices climbed, excitement swept through the hall. Even those who couldn't bid leaned forward, eager to see what crazy sums the top fruits would fetch. When the third-to-last item was carried onto the stage, a hush spread through the room. Paramecia-type butterfruit, the auctioneer announced. According to the Devil Fruit Encyclopedia, eating it grants the ability to create and manipulate butter freely. The auctioneer's eyes flicked toward box number 2. He knew who the obvious buyer was. Sure enough, a moment later he listened to his earpiece and declared, "Box number 2 bids, 110,000 berries." Kane scoffed. "Humph, how stingy. That's all they're willing to spend?" But he couldn't be bothered to play a petty bidding war with the Charlotte family over butter. His sights were set higher. The Maramara no Mi still awaited.